Your name is Clarice, right? With nothing to do but wait, Qin Haisheng walked over to Flicker and started a conversation. Those jewel-green eyes blinked once. She nodded politely. Yeah, I'm Clarice. Hi, Qin. Across the room, Wanda sat on the sofa with the TV on. The moment she saw Qin talking to Clarice, she lowered her head a little, looking oddly stiff. Quicksilver noticed instantly. He let out a quiet snort, stood up, and without asking, pulled Wanda toward the suite next door. Clarice watched them leave, then nudged Qin lightly with her elbow, sounding unsure. You and Wanda. Did she misunderstand something? Qin waved it off. Probably not. I only met the two of them a couple days ago. Clarice covered her mouth and laughed softly. I don't know. That looked a lot like jealousy. Do you want me to explain? I'd hate to mess up someone's relationship for no reason. Qin smiled, a little awkward, but he didn't go into details about Wanda. He just shook his head. No. I'll handle it myself. Truthfully, Wanda did seem to have a good impression of him, but they barely knew each other. Saying it was love would be ridiculous. Qin still planned to keep Scarlet Witch on the right path and prevent future disasters, but there was no need to rush that. Right now, he wasn't here to flirt with Clarice either. He wanted her ability. That portal power. If he could get even a few drops of her core bubbles, it would be huge. And since everyone was stuck living in a hotel, nobody used their powers casually. Which meant fewer bubbles. Which meant Qin felt like he was starving. So he guided the talk where he wanted it to go. By the way, your power is opening portals, right? How far can you send one? Clarice rested her chin on her hand, thinking. For now, about 100 kilometers. Then she added, almost proud but trying not to show it. When I first awakened, I could only do 1 kilometer. It's been improving. Qin's eyes lit up. 100 kilometers is already crazy. Then why is Raven still searching for someone suited for underwater combat? If you can open portals, isn't it simple? Open one inside the prison, and we pull Magneto out. Clarice's smile turned into a helpless one. If only it worked like that. The exit point has to be somewhere I've been within the last 100 days. I can't open a portal to places I've never visited. Qin nodded slowly. Makes sense. A power that broken had to have limits. Clarice continued, but if everything goes well and we actually reach the underwater prison, then I can open a portal back to the surface, maybe even straight to land. We won't have to fight our way back. Got it. Qin nodded again. Even with restrictions, it was still an absurdly useful ability. And that only made him want it more. He leaned in a bit, voice friendly. You're seriously impressive. Can you show me? Clarice frowned slightly. Not really. Raven doesn't want us using powers, and she definitely doesn't want us leaving the hotel. Qin pressed his lips together. So she was the obedient type. He wasn't surprised. Clarice looked quiet and well-behaved, but Qin knew enough to stay careful. She was tied to Sabretooth, and Sabretooth was Magneto's loyal dog. Even if Clarice acted soft, her beliefs were probably set deep. Still, he didn't need to drag her outside. It's fine, Qin said quickly. We don't have to leave the hotel. Just open it here in the living room. Make both ends here. That's allowed, right? Clarice blinked. But what's the point? In a fight, the point is distance. If both ends are in the same room, isn't that just silly? Qin laughed. Silly? No way. In a real battle, it's terrifying. He started explaining with his hands, like he was drawing the scene in the air. Say I kick an enemy into the air. You open a portal behind him. He drops right into it. And you set the exit behind me. So he comes out right where I want him, and if our timing is clean, I hit that spot the moment he appears. Qin tilted his head. Tell me, how does he escape that? Clarice's eyes widened, like someone had switched on a light in her brain. You can do that? Yes. Qin stood up, energy rising in his voice. Come on. Let's test it. If we really rescue Magneto, a trick like this might save our lives. What Qin Haisheng was teaching her wasn't some secret trick. It was simply how portals were meant to be used. In the future, during mutant wars against Sentinels, this was exactly the style Flicker fought with. The problem was that the Flicker in front of him was still a girl under 20. Her control was clumsy, her instincts underdeveloped. Until now, all she cared about was one thing, making the teleport distance longer. She had never seriously considered that short-range portals could be terrifying too. Whoosh! The Supreme Suite living room had gone quiet after Mystique left. In that silence, a young figure kept blinking across the room like a restless shadow. One moment Qin Haisheng stood near the doorway. He stepped into a purple-lit portal. And the next second he appeared in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. Nightcrawler and Toad had been in the living room earlier, watching TV. But after seeing Qin bounce around again and again, both of them frowned, exchanged a look, and wordlessly retreated to their rooms. Qin Haisheng was happy they were gone. Less eyes. Less trouble. He kept having Clarisse open portals, one after another, watching carefully, waiting for what he really wanted. Then it happened. A faint silver bubble drifted down from Clarisse's side. Qin's eyes snapped bright. He slid to her side instantly and reached out. A prompt rang out in his head. Picked up Spatial Element Core +6. From Blinker. Accumulate 300 Spatial Element Cores to activate the first spatial ability. Qin Haisheng froze. 300? Not 100. And the message didn't even say, activate Blinker's portal ability directly. It said first spatial ability, meaning the space-type power system wasn't a single skill. It was a whole tree. And Clarisse's ability wasn't ordinary. Fire and ice cores usually only needed 100 points to awaken. But space demanded 3 times that. Did that mean Clarisse was actually a level 4 mutant? On paper, it made sense. But in practice, her personal combat strength wasn't that high. Besides portals, she only used simple spatial lances. As support, she was terrifying. As a frontline fighter, she was barely above a trained human. Still, if this ability landed on Qin Haisheng, it wouldn't be support. It would be a divine weapon. The problem was the drop rate. Clarisse didn't drop bubbles often. And needing 300 cores made it worse. Qin Haisheng's stomach sank slightly. Clarisse belonged to Magneto's side. Once this mission ended, Qin would likely lose access to her completely. If he only farmed 100 or 200 points, it would be meaningless. He'd be stuck halfway forever. At that moment, Qin even floated a mischievous idea. He asked Clarisse to open a portal to Juggernaut's room, claiming he wanted to scare the pig who slept all day. Clarisse refused without hesitation. Qin could only sigh inwardly. Not your power, not your rules. Borrowed abilities always came with borrowed limits. All right, Qin said, forcing the mood back up, let's test more ways to use your portal. Clarisse had already opened more than a dozen in a row. She was about to stop, clearly tired and ready to be done with his training session. So Qin threw out a new idea. Portals usually stayed open for around a dozen seconds. Sometimes a bit more. And Clarisse could also close them early if she wanted. Qin asked the question that mattered. What if closing the portal could kill someone? If an enemy is halfway through and you close it suddenly, wouldn't space cut them in two? Clarisse blinked, startled, then shook her head. It probably won't work like that, she said honestly. When I close a portal, it doesn't shut instantly. There's a short delay, like half a second. Half a second sounded tiny. But in combat, it was forever. Quicksilver could run laps around the planet in that time. Even normal fighters could react, pull back, dodge, adjust. Nobody would just hang there and politely wait to be sliced. Qin Haisheng didn't accept it so easily. Let's test it. They opened a portal. 5 seconds later, Clarisse deliberately shut it down. Qin watched carefully. She was right. The closure was gradual, taking a little over half a second. Then Qin tried a different approach. The next time Clarisse opened a portal, Qin told her to hold it, to push past the point where she normally gave up. Don't close it. Don't let it collapse. Fight it. Clarisse's jaw tightened. She forced herself to maintain it. 10 seconds. 12. 14. 16. Her personal record. Her hands trembled with effort. Then, when she finally couldn't hold on anymore, the portal collapsed. Not slowly. Not with a half-second fade. It snapped shut in a blink. Less than 1/10 of a second. Qin Haisheng's eyes widened. He slapped his thigh hard. That's it. He leaned forward, voice rising with excitement. What you need is control through restraint. Hold it. Suppress it. Keep it from collapsing right up until the last moment. When it finally breaks, it won't close slowly anymore. It'll shut like a guillotine. He gestured like he was pulling a spring tight. It's the same principle as jumping. You bend down first. And on a trampoline, the deeper you press, the harder you rebound. Clarice stared at him. Then her gaze drifted down to the hand that had just slapped his own thigh, still full of energy, still talking like he'd discovered the laws of the universe. For a second, she didn't know what to say. She only knew one thing. This boy wasn't just watching training. He was turning her power into a weapon.
Hey everyone, welcome to our channel, and thank you for your support. If there's a favorite novel on the channel and you want the next part, you're just one step away. Become a Patreon member and I can make it depending on your tier. Thank you for your attention.
The next afternoon, the demonic finally arrived at the hotel with a tall, blonde man. This man looks a little fierce, and he is not a good person at first glance. And looking at his rough skin and frosty face, he looks like a coolie from a hard time. When the shapeshifter brings everyone together again, Qin Haisheng found that this guy's gaze had been moving back and forth between Wanda and Flicker, with an unconcealable look of greed in his eyes. Qin Haisheng frowned at that time. Where did the bastards come from? How dare you fight these two goddesses? At this time, the demon girl also seemed to notice the reaction of the blonde man and quickly coughed lightly and said, "This is the water man I specially invited to help us rescue Eric, Maurice Bench. His ability is to control water, and he can transform into water himself, best for mutants fighting underwater. With him on board, we're much more sure of rescuing Eric." Everyone probably hadn't heard of this water man, but after learning about his ability, they all nodded their heads. If this person's ability is on land or even on a desert or other type of land, it must be very weak. But in the depths of the ocean, that's his home turf. It is estimated that except for a few powerful mutants of the Omega level, no one can defeat him in the sea. Waterman Morris? Qin Haisheng was stunned for a moment and finally remembered who this guy was. Isn't this the villain who grabbed the girl with Spider-Man? He remembers. This guy was originally an ordinary sailor. Later, he fell into the sea and received mysterious radiation, which led to an anomaly and evolved the ability to control and transform into water. So, does this guy's appearance here mean that Spider-Man has also appeared? And also, has the plot of the Avengers also begun? Then he has to watch Wanda's sister closely, and he must not let the iron pimple of vision deceive Wanda's girl. At night, a medium-sized military helicopter flew over the vast sea. In the cabin, the demon girl said with a serious face to the 9 mutants sitting on both sides who had all changed into federal uniforms. "Now, let's clarify your mission. In this rescue plan, Maurice, Clarice, Wanda, Mortal, the Toad Man, and Pietro and I were tasked with going into the undersea prison to rescue Eric. The remaining 4 are responsible for answering from above. When the time comes, I'll impersonate Federal Colonel Marcus and take an order from Congress to interrogate Eric. Of course, the documents must be fake. That's where Wanda is needed. Use your abilities to create illusions, convince them that everything is true, and then let us ride the deep-sea elevator into the undersea prison. If all goes well and we manage to meet Eric. When the time comes, Clarice will be in charge of opening a portal that will teleport everyone directly to the helicopter. However, once the deep-sea prison guards react halfway and stop it, then we'll have to force our way in. When the time comes, Maurice and Mortal, you two will be responsible for blocking the prison guards' attacks. Wanda and Clarice assist them. If you have to, you can smash the deep-sea channel, Desperate. There are 2 mutants among us who have the ability to fight underwater, and as long as we let the seawater pour into the deep-sea channel, we can take the initiative. Then Pietro took me and went to rescue Eric as fast as we could. Hearing the demon girl's plan, Qin Haisheng couldn't help frowning slightly. How did this keep him out and let him stay outside to answer? Didn't he come with him this time to fight for mutants so that he could take the opportunity to pick up attributes? This kept him on the helicopter, and he picked up a yarn. As for the so-called stay outside to pick up, there's a flicker, what else is there to answer? Once Magneto is rescued, then they only need to open a portal, and they can return directly to the American continent, okay? So, Qin Haisheng immediately raised his hand and said, "Wait a minute, I'm going to save Master Wan with you." The demon girl glared at Qin Haisheng angrily and said, "What are you going to do? Your superpower is flames. Once you enter the water, your ability will be restrained to death, and you will be assigned to protect you when the time comes. So, are you going to make trouble?" Qin Haisheng shook his head and said, "Even if I don't use superpowers, I'm still a powerful warrior, at least no worse than Raven's predecessors." The demon girl rolled her eyes in anger and said, "You mean that my superpowers are also a burden in the battle under the sea?" Qin Haisheng spread his hands and said, "I didn't say that you were a burden, but I must be better than you anyway." The demonic girl sneered and said, "In that case, let's make 2 strokes. We don't use superpowers. If you can defeat me, I'll take you to the bottom of the sea." Qin Haisheng was speechless, thinking to himself, does it make a difference whether you use your superpower in battle or not? In this way, it is just a restriction of my superpower. But it's not a problem. I've been working hard to pick up attributes for more than a month, and it's not for nothing. And the demon girl is confident that she has mastered the fighting for many years. If she doesn't use superpowers, she can't beat a child, so what kind of energy is there? Both of them seemed to be aroused, and they actually stood up one after another in the medium-sized helicopter, facing each other. "It's not. You're going to fight." Seeing this, Wanda hurriedly persuaded, "Forget it, this is on the plane. What if you break the plane again?" As a result, the 2 people in the fight didn't pay attention to it at all. I saw the demon girl sneer, and the original white suit on her body disappeared in a flash and returned to her original appearance. There is not an inch of the whole body, only the mysterious skin that is blue and covered with patterns. Apparently she's still not used to fighting in her clothes. But Qin Haisheng couldn't help but be stunned. "Why don't you bring any clothes with you?" "Grandma Witch, we are going to fight, not fighting." "You're so old, and you're not afraid of catching a cold." Seeing Qin Haisheng's stunned appearance, the demon girl couldn't help but sneer, and then with a coquettish sound, she flew up the long legs of 1 meter and 2 and kicked towards Qin Haisheng's head. Qin Haisheng really hasn't learned any fighting skills, and he can't compare with the demon girl who has been fighting for decades. But Qin Haisheng's attributes for more than a month are really not picked up for nothing. In particular, in the gambling fight with Quicksilver 2 days ago, Qin Haisheng took the opportunity to pick up a lot of speed attribute bubbles the size of watermelons. This boosted his speed to an unbelievable level for an ordinary person. Although it is definitely far from Quicksilver's 0.1 second man, but it is not at all comparable to ordinary people or even ordinary mutants. So, even if the demon girl's kick disappeared without a trace, how caught people off guard. However, when Qin Haisheng reacted, he still raised his hand lightly and held the demon girl's feet and neck. Huh? The demon girl didn't expect her attack to be cracked by Qin Haisheng so easily, but with decades of combat experience, she didn't panic at all. At that moment, he suddenly jumped up, and his body spun rapidly in midair, trying to use this rotating force to let his captured foot out of Qin Haisheng's control. At the same time, her other foot also swept towards Qin Haisheng's neck from the other direction. It seems that she wants to give Qin Haisheng an invincible scissor kick. It's just a pity. No matter how experienced the demon girl is in combat, she is not a mutant who is known for her strength after all. She wanted to use the power of her whole body rotation to break free from the control of Qin Haisheng's palm. The idea is good. If she is facing an ordinary person, even a special forces fight, maybe it will work. After all, the gap between ordinary people is limited. No matter how strong a person's strength is, the strength of a single hand cannot compete with the strength of others' whole body. But the problem: Qin Haisheng is not an ordinary person. And he is not an ordinary mutant. He was in the Mutant Academy a month ago, and the bubbles of the 6 basic attributes were not missing. In the past few days, he has been crazy about wool on the red tank. I didn't get much of the other basic attributes, but the strength attribute was a bumper harvest. Therefore, among Qin Haisheng's 6 basic attributes, strength is actually much more powerful than speed. Although in terms of strength, he was likewise far inferior to the red tank. But it's more than enough to deal with the demon girl. So, I only heard a click. The demonic woman's frantically spun body slammed in the air, and a face suddenly twisted into a mask of pain. But it turned out that her move not only failed to get the foot she controlled out of Qin Haisheng, but instead, Shengsheng twisted and dislocated his foot and neck. At the same time, when her other leg kicked over, she was also firmly grabbed by Qin Haisheng. Next, I heard a kudong. The graceful body of the demon girl, the upper body fell directly on the floor of the cabin. But her 2 legs were held high by Qin Haisheng. That posture looks like a legendary old man's cart. Qin Haisheng didn't take advantage of the victory to pursue again, but just smiled faintly. Senior Raven, look. My combat power is okay, right? The demonic girl is a little faceless now. Say that the other party can't do it. Isn't his predecessor, who was restrained by 1 move, weak? So she could only say with a black face. Okay, you're awesome, aren't you? Let go, my mother's foot is going to be broken by you. Qin Haisheng let go of his hand with some staggering and gently put the demon girl's feet on the ground. Then he retorted, what you said. I twisted this for you. You twisted it yourself, but don't say it. Your reflexive somersault for 3.5 weeks is really handsome. The demonic girl clenched her teeth, her eyes were bursting into flames, and she couldn't wait to pounce on this guy and bite him twice. It's over. The image I managed to create is all ruined in front of this guy. Boom dash. 10 minutes later, the medium-sized helicopter landed on an offshore drilling platform. It's a long-abandoned rig where oil was drained years ago. However, it was not demolished. Instead, after some transformation, it has been directly turned into a special submarine prison, which is specially used to hold some serious criminals. Seeing the situation here, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but sigh secretly. Uncle Wan's life experience is really rich. At least when it comes to jail, there is simply no one to match. As far as he knew, Uncle Wan had been imprisoned in the space station in the sky, and he had also been imprisoned in an underground prison. This time, he was held to the bottom of the sea at a depth of more than 1,000 meters. This is a cow who has wiped out all the sea, land, and air prisons. The moment the helicopter landed, more than a dozen heavily armed fighters surrounded it with guns. Clearly, they were wary of the sudden arrival of the plane, because they didn't get any notice. Under normal circumstances, anyone who comes here will be notified by the superior in advance. However, because the helicopter is subordinate to the federal military, the talents on the platform did not attack at the first time. After the plane came to a standstill, the hatch slowly opened, and then the demon girl changed into the appearance of an elderly general with gray hair and jumped off the plane first. Fortunately, her foot was just dislocated and not fractured. Otherwise, I am afraid that this time the plan of action will be forced to be interrupted. Originally, the foot and neck of the demon girl were too tightly held by Qin Haisheng. Although the bones were not broken, the soft tissues were also seriously injured. Under normal circumstances, she would have to limp no matter how she walks. But Wanda casts an illusion on her, convincing her that her foot is not injured at all. So, she miraculously gave up all the pain in that foot and walked like an ordinary person. Qin Haisheng looked at it from the side, smacking his tongue secretly. I didn't expect Wanda's illusion to be so useful. What a treasure girl. It's just a pity that Wanda's superpower is simply a Pyro. For so many days, Qin Haisheng was stunned that he couldn't get an attribute bubble from Wanda. This made Qin Haisheng full of frustration. It seems that if you want to gain Wanda's superpowers, it is estimated that the only way to soak her in your hands is to let her release her superpowers in front of her if she has nothing to do, so that it is possible. Colonel Marcus, why are you here? When a group of armed men saw the witch, they immediately saluted in unison. Then the leading warden stepped forward and asked, "Did the colonel visit the deep-sea prison have something to do, and why didn't they inform us from above?" The demon girl looked at each other coldly and said, "There is something important that needs to be urgently interrogated by Magneto." As she spoke, she beckoned behind her. Wanda, disguised as a female Union soldier, immediately stepped forward and handed a folder to the warden. And the demon girl said pretendingly, "This is an urgent approval signed by Congress. Please implement it immediately." Hearing that it was a document issued directly by the Congress, the warden was shocked and hurriedly took it over and checked it. In fact, the folder was bound with nothing more than a dozen blank sheets of paper. But Wanda had silently cast an illusion on him as she handed over the folder. As a result, it seemed to him to be a detailed congressional document. Even in his illusion, in order to avoid mistakes, he personally made a special phone call and asked his superiors for instructions. His superiors ordered him to cooperate with Colonel Marcus without any hindrance. Since there are legal procedures and orders from his superiors, how dare he, a small captain-level warden, dare to stop the colonels of the Federation? So, this guy ordered to let him go in a daze and let the demon girl and a group of 7 people take the deep-sea elevator and quickly descend towards the bottom of the sea at a depth of 1,200 meters. It wasn't until the elevator sank down the passage for a long time that the lieutenant adjutant on the side finally couldn't help but ask the warden, "Sir, didn't Lieutenant Colonel Hans have an order that anyone who wants to see prisoner 001 must have his own consent? Although Colonel Marcus is of a higher rank than Lieutenant Colonel Hans, we are Lieutenant Colonel Hans's subordinates after all, and you put people in without asking Lieutenant Colonel Hans this. It's not right." The warden was stunned for a moment and then roared angrily, "Bastard, I obviously called Lieutenant Colonel Hans just now. Why don't you remember what happened for a while? Did I remind you not to drink while you're on duty?" The lieutenant was also confused, was sprayed by his boss, and didn't dare to wipe it until the warden finished scolding. He looked aggrieved and weakly defended, "Sir, I didn't drink. I've been standing behind you and I haven't seen you call Lieutenant Colonel Hans." The warden vaguely sensed that something was wrong and hurriedly looked at the others. The deep-sea prison guards shook their heads again, and someone spoke. "Warden, you've been standing there looking through the papers." "Oh no, you didn't even turn it. You just stared at the first page of the document for a long time, and you didn't even move your footsteps, and of course you didn't go back to the office to make a special call." The warden's face became more and more ugly, and I don't know when. Cold sweat has been slowly flowing down my forehead. If it was just the lieutenant himself who said this, he would have thought that this guy was drinking too much and talking nonsense. But if everyone at the scene thinks that he hasn't called to confirm, then the problem was clearly his own. So he immediately rushed back to his office like crazy, grabbed the special line on the desk and called. In the elevator that went down at a constant speed, except for the waterman Morris, the expressions of the group were somewhat nervous. After all, at this time, the elevator had already gone down 700 or 800 meters. In this deep-sea environment, if anything happens, it will be a huge challenge for them. It is not afraid of such an environment at all, and this product may hope to break the elevator and passage and dive directly into the seawater, which will make him feel more secure. In fact, the speed of the elevator is fast enough, but everyone still has a feeling that the sun is like a year. They just want it to go well. As long as you can successfully meet Magneto, this mission will be almost a success. Of course, Qin Haisheng is not included here. This thing is still looking forward to a big war. If he really can't fight, then where will he pick up attributes? So, what's the point of him going to the trouble of following him? But I'm really afraid of something. At this moment, all of a sudden, the downward speed of the elevator slowed down and gradually stopped. Less than a second later, the lift restarted, but this time it was clearly moved upwards. Oops, they found out. The demon girl exclaimed in surprise, and then immediately said, "Qin, break the elevator, and we will go down the passage directly. As for the identity will be recognized, the demon girl has long expected it." Although Wanda's illusion is powerful, the current Wanda is still too young and her ability is still relatively weak, and she can only affect one person at a time. Although Gongdu has dealt with the highest-ranking warden here, there are so many people present, but if one person reminds him, this matter must be exposed. Therefore, the demon girl didn't expect to be fooled around forever from the beginning, only hoping to make a time difference, and before they met Magneto, they were not discovered, and it was done. Now that the plan has failed, there is nothing to hesitate about, just break through. Because the red tank did not follow, at this moment, among the 7 of them, in terms of attack power, the strongest one would belong to Qin Haisheng, so the demon girl directly ordered Qin Haisheng to take the lead. Qin Haisheng naturally wouldn't drop the chain at this time. He asked the others to move to the edge of the elevator as much as possible, and then let out a loud shout, condensing a cone-shaped pillar of fire in his palm. He didn't throw the pillar of fire directly, but controlled the cone-shaped pillar of fire to spin rapidly in the palm of his hand, and then pressed towards the bottom of the elevator. In an instant, the bottom of the center of the elevator was drilled by this cone-shaped pillar of fire with a hole about 1 meter in diameter. Seeing this scene, the demon girl glanced at Qin Haisheng with appreciation. It is also the ability of flame control, but Qin Haisheng is much stronger than the Burning Man John of the Mutant Academy. If the fireman was here, most of them would have been directly hit by a pillar of fire. This can also blow the elevator through. But the space here is small, and I am afraid that my own people here will also be burned to the ground. However, Qin Haisheng's control over the flames was extremely strong, and the cone-shaped pillar of fire could penetrate the thick alloy plate in an instant, which must be very hot, but they were obviously less than a meter away, but they didn't feel much heat at all, which was terrifying. Let's go dash. The moment the elevator drilled through, a shrill alarm sounded in the passage. The demon girl let out a loud cry and jumped down the hole without hesitation. Seeing this, the others followed suit and jumped down one after another. Jumping out of the elevator, there is almost a straight-down alloy tunnel underneath. Judging from the height they had descended from before, there were at least 400 or 500 meters from the bottom, and if they fell straight down like this, even with the super physique of mutants, they would have to fall directly into flesh. However, this is the passage of the lift, which naturally has a fixed steel frame. After several people jumped out of the lift, they directly flew and hugged the steel frame around them, and then slid all the way down the steel frame so that they could naturally control their speed. Quicksilver didn't care at all. He didn't hug the steel frame, but hugged his sister Wanda with one hand and let the 2 of them fall down in free fall. But after falling a distance of dozens of meters, he suddenly stepped on the steep alloy channel pipe wall, ran a distance on the pipe wall like a leisurely stroll, and then fell down again with his sister in his arms. In this way, the descent speed of the 2 of them will naturally be much faster, and it is believed that it will not take a few rounds to reach the bottom of the sea. But at this moment, everyone heard a faint roar overhead, and the voice grew louder and louder, like a galloping horse. The demon's face immediately changed, and he hurriedly shouted, "It's not good," they poured seawater into the channel. Knowing that this huge roar was actually formed by the inflow of seawater, except for the Waterman and the Toad Man, their complexions changed greatly. Don't look at the previous Demon Girl's plan. Once their identities are exposed, and when they are attacked in the passage, they really can't directly smash the deep sea passage and introduce seawater. But that's just a way to do it when you're desperate. After all, there are only 2 people in their group who are suitable for underwater combat. This is a place thousands of meters below the surface of the sea, and it is not easy for even mutants to resist the terrifying pressure of the deep sea. As a result, before they could make a move, the deep sea prison side actually did it directly. That's crazy, isn't it? In the deep sea prison, in addition to Magneto, there should be many important prisoners, right? And in addition to the prisoners, there must also be prison guards and the like. They poured seawater directly into the passage. Wouldn't this directly kill everyone under the deep sea? However, there was no time to be surprised at this time, and the demon girl hurriedly shouted, "Morris, block it for me." The waterman Morris card laughed strangely and said, "No problem, but don't forget to promise me something." With that, he swept his flickering body with a wanton gaze, and then suddenly stopped his figure, no longer sliding down the steel frame, but looking up at the seawater that fell in the air like a beast. I'm rubbing. What did this guy mean by what he just said? What messy conditions did the female devil agree to him? Nima, the old witch of the demon girl, didn't sell him the flickering girl. Not to mention, with Qin Haisheng's understanding of the waterman Morris, this person may really take this opportunity to make some excessive demands. After all, he is not a member of the Mutant Brotherhood, so why should he risk saving Magneto? And this person is evil in nature, and he is very greedy for money and lustful. However, with his current strength, it shouldn't be difficult to get money. It's easy to want a woman, but can a normal woman be the same as a mutant woman? Therefore, when this guy agrees to participate in the rescue of Magneto, he will make some strange requests, which is simply not too normal. Bastard, dare to hit me with the idea of flashing my girl. Wait until I look back and see how I cleaned you up. And that female devil, in order to save Magneto, you really dare to agree to any conditions. Although Qin Haisheng estimated that the demon girl was just casually perfunctory to the waterman, she shouldn't really hand over the flicker to that disgusting guy afterwards. But this did not affect Qin Haisheng to make a note on this female devil in his small book. The others continued to slide down the steel frame, and the watermen were already catching up with the water that was pouring down from the passage. I saw him stretch out his hand, and the surging seawater seemed to see a mother's child, surging happily towards the waterman, and then quickly condensed into a thick layer of ice above the waterman. Suddenly, the originally powerful influx of seawater was actually blocked by the ice created by the water people. Yes, this guy can not only control water, but also turn water into ice or steam. In this respect, this guy seems to be more capable than Iceman. After all, Poppy the Iceman can only control ice, or frost and cold. Frost and cold can also be seen as misty ice crystals. But the waterman has played with all three forms of water. However, the biggest weakness of the waterman is that he can only control the water, but cannot create water out of thin air. Once he reaches a place where there is no water at all, he is no different from a fish thrown ashore. Poppy, the Iceman, on the other hand, can create ice out of thin air with his ability. Therefore, although the two of them are both third-level mutants, the potential of the Iceman is much greater than that of the waterman. Seeing that the waterman made a move, he really blocked the falling seawater, and the demon girl was overjoyed, feeling that this foreign aid was not in vain. She hurriedly beckoned everyone to hurry up and descend, striving to reach the bottom of the sea as soon as possible. But at this time, only a click sound was heard. The ice, which had been condensed several meters thick, was bursting open under the strong water pressure. The waterman hurriedly shouted while constantly reinforcing the ice. Oops, it's too stressful, I can't last long. The demon girl was startled and hurriedly said, Hold on, we can rescue people in half a minute at most. But the waterman said, No, it's too dangerous. What should I do if you save people and just let Flicker open the portal and send you all to the surface of the sea? So, if you want me to keep working for you, you'll have to keep flickering by my side. Hearing that the waterman actually wanted Flicker to follow him, the demon girl couldn't help but be stunned, and then said angrily, How is this possible? Flicker is a guarantee that we will leave the bottom of the sea safely after we save people, and if you let her follow you, how can we save people? The waterman sneered and said, Sure enough, you were originally going to let me take the thunder for you here, and then you saved people, threw me here, and ran away, right? The shapeshifter hurriedly argued, How is that possible? After saving people, we will first open a portal next to you, teleport to you, and then take you back to the helicopter with us." The waterman said disdainfully, "It sounds better than singing. If you have already rescued people, how can you risk returning to me again? After all, I am not from your brotherhood." "Less nonsense. If you don't leave the flicker, then I'll remove the ice now and let's swim in the water together." As soon as he spoke, the waterman had stopped solidifying the ice. As a result, the ice immediately cracked again under the strong water pressure. Meantime, the raging seawater has begun to spray down like a fountain along the cracks in the ice. Hell, the shapeshifter was angry and angry. But at this time, she really didn't dare to annoy the waterman. Otherwise, the water people are really desperate to put down the seawater, so the rest of them will not be able to save people. Although the toad people also have the ability to fight underwater. But his ability is far worse than that of a waterman. And the toad man is not afraid of water at most, but he does not have the ability to control water, so it is better to rely on the toad man to rely on the ability to flicker and directly open the portal and run away. But they now have a chance to get out. But what about Magneto? Because in this timeline, there is no such thing as a demon girl blocking a gun for Magneto, and then losing her superpowers and being abandoned by Magneto, and the demon girl is still loyal to Magneto. Seeing Magneto as the spiritual leader of mutants at this time, if necessary, she can really die for Magneto. So, after only a brief hesitation, she turned her head and shouted, "Go! You go back to Maurice, and we'll come back to you when we're done saving people." Flicker's face suddenly changed greatly, and he quickly shook his head and said, "I don't want to. Don't follow that person. She is not stupid at all," what the waterman said just now, and the eyes that looked at her, she has already noticed it, and knows that that guy has bad intentions towards her. Where does he dare to go to the mouth of the tiger? But the demon girl looked cold and roared, "You have to obey, or you don't want Eric. If you don't obey the order, we won't be able to care about your father anymore after we rescue Eric." It turned out that this time not only Magneto was arrested, but Magneto's hardcore brother Saber-Tooth Tiger was also imprisoned here. And Flicker is the adopted daughter of the saber-toothed tiger since she was a child, and now the demon girl directly threatens the saber-toothed tiger with Flicker, which makes her suddenly don't know what to do. Seeing the aggrieved and embarrassed look on her face, the demon girl's heart softened slightly, and she whispered, "You can rest assured, don't worry. If we want to get out of the seabed, we have to rely on you, and we can't leave you alone." Flickering also knew that the other party couldn't really leave her alone. But the problem is, the dead B-State waterman let himself go over and follow him at this time. Who knows if he will take the opportunity to do something disgusting to her. It's just that the demon girl has already said this, and Flicker can't really care about the safety of his adoptive father, so he has to grit his teeth and agree at the moment. "Well, I'll go." Flickering gritted her teeth, held back her tears, and waved her hand. A purple door of light appeared in front of her. The exit of the portal was set by her 100 meters above, near the waterman. But just as she was about to step into the portal, she heard Qin Haisheng shout loudly, "Wait a minute, I'll go with you." The demon girl frowned and reprimanded. "Qin, what are you doing? It's none of your business here." As a result, Qin Haisheng didn't bird her at all. Qin Haisheng was originally not far below the Flash, and after speaking, he had already climbed up quickly along the steel frame, and then grabbed the flashing little hand and said, "Let's go. With me, no one can bully you." When he heard this, he was suddenly moved. Though she had already discovered that the way this Huaxia kid looked at her was also a little lustful. However, she is not disgusted at all. There's no way. The handsome man has taken a fancy to her, and that's called love at first sight. And a disgusting guy like the waterman has a crush on her. That's what you want. Seeing that Qin Haisheng was completely disobedient to her, the demon girl couldn't help but roar angrily, "Qin, don't make trouble." Qin Haisheng glanced at the demon girl coldly and said, "You roar wool, I'm not your subordinate. I can do whatever I like, can you control it?" Magician. Of course, the demon girl understands that at this time, letting Flicker go to the side of the waterman will inevitably suffer a loss. But anyway, in this state of fighting, no matter how dirty the waterman's mind is, nothing will really happen to the flicker. Therefore, in line with the idea of focusing on the overall situation, at this time, we can only let the flicker sacrifice a little. But if Qin Haisheng also followed, then it would anger the waterman. Even if these two people fight jealously, wouldn't it be easy to spoil a big thing? That's why she stopped it again and again, not wanting Qin Haisheng to follow and cause trouble. But who would have thought that Qin Haisheng, who had always respected her before, actually didn't give her face at all at this time, so he almost pointed at her nose and scolded. That's when she suddenly remembered. This kid is a student of Charles, not a member of their mutant fraternity at all. So, I really can't care about him. I can't manage it, I can't beat it. So, what else can she do? He could only watch Qin Haisheng take his flickering little hand and teleport to 100 meters above him. Brush dash at once, Qin Haisheng and Flicker held hands and appeared in front of the waterman Morris, making the evil sailor's face darken. Yellow skin. Who told you to come? Faced with the insulting title of the waterman, Qin Haisheng frowned and snorted coldly. Aren't you playing in the water? Can you wash your mouth before you speak? You're looking for death. The waterman was furious, stretched out his hand and pointed at him, and suddenly a column of water was wrapped in hard ice cubes, and he hit Qin Haisheng. Qin Haisheng did not show weakness, and immediately raised his hand. A fireball flew out, blocking the water column. If an ordinary flame was poured by this column of water, it would have been extinguished immediately. However, what Qin Haisheng released was not an ordinary flame, but a flame with a high temperature of up to 3,600 degrees. Moreover, with the support of Qin Haisheng's continuous ability, he not only blocked the water column from the other party, but even pressed back a distance of 2 meters in reverse. Because the water in the water column is constantly vaporized, the surrounding vapor spreads, and the two sides are only separated by less than 5 meters, but they can only see each other's shadows. The waterman sneered and said, "Sure enough, there are 2 hits. No wonder you dare to be so crazy. Still, don't you know? Fire and water are not compatible. Is the ability to flame inherently restrained by the ability to control water?" As he spoke, the waterman suddenly blew a breath, and suddenly, the diffuse water vapor seemed to have life, and began to tumble violently, and condensed into a huge grimace, which pounced on Qin Haisheng. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng pushed the flicker downwards and shouted, "Clarice, you stay away and see how I clean up this scoundrel." As he spoke, his whole body shook, and in an instant, his whole body burst into flames, and the whole body burned. The grimace of the water vapor pounced on Qin Haisheng's flame body, and he immediately let out a wail, and it was evaporated in a blink of an eye. This time there was not even a little water vapor left. And at this time, Qin Haisheng had already loosened the steel frame pillar otherwise. The high temperature on his body is afraid that the steel frame will be burned in an instant. And at this moment, he turned into a flame, and the weight of his body also changed, infinitely close to zero, and it was not a problem to float in the air for a short time. Immediately after, Qin Haisheng's flame body swelled rapidly, and he actually pounced on the waterman in turn, as if he wanted to use the fire on his body to burn the waterman dry. "Idiot!" The waterman scolded angrily with disdain and said, "If it's on land, maybe I'm really not going to be able to kill you. But it's at the bottom of the sea. No matter how hot your flame is, can you still burn the whole ocean dry? Lao Tzu, I'll douse you with seawater." After all, the waterman no longer controls the ice above and even. Instead, the energy in the ice was withdrawn, and the ice layer a few meters later lost its support, and the sound of Titicaca shattering was heard quickly. In the crevices of the ice that grew bigger and bigger, the seawater gushed out like a roaring dragon, and then, under the control of the waterman, frantically pounced towards Qin Haisheng's flaming body. At this moment, the demon girl and the others had not yet landed at the bottom of the sea, and when they looked up and saw this situation, the demon girl couldn't help but curse loudly. She knew that it would definitely not be good to let that guy Qin follow. Sure enough, it only took a while for the fight to start. Isn't this just deliberately making trouble? When I saw the seawater above, I was about to lose control and completely smash down. Qin Haisheng's heart couldn't help but be very shocked. In this way, the seawater that had been blocked for a long time hit his body completely, and no matter how high the temperature of the flames on his body was, I am afraid that it would really be extinguished in an instant. Is it possible to give up, and now you have to run away with the Flash? I'm so unwilling. Oops. This water elemental core only picked up 30 points, which is really a big loss. Yes, the reason why Qin Haisheng had to accompany the flashing up, in addition to not wanting this girl to be taken advantage of by the Waterman, he also had the idea of coming to the Waterman's wool. Just now, when the Waterman began to block the seawater, he dropped a lot of attribute bubbles. Several of the bubbles are blue. At that time, Qin Haisheng was very greedy when he looked at it. It's just that if it weren't for the Waterman forcing Flicker to accompany him, Qin Haisheng wouldn't have found a reason to go back to the top to gather wool. He had just turned into flames, and he had swelled up and pounced on the Waterman. In fact, I didn't really think that I could kill the Waterman like this. Just because. The falling bubbles floated around the Waterman, and he had to use physical contact to pick them up, so he had to make this decision. The result was unexpected, but it completely angered the Waterman, and this guy actually planned to directly pour all the seawater above to extinguish the flames on Qin Haisheng's body. Qin Haisheng would not really be doused to death by the seawater. The flames on his body would be extinguished by the infinite seawaters, but if he really can't bear it, he only needs to return to his physical state, and the most he can do is be hit by the sea. With his current physical fitness, he will be injured at most because of this, and he will not be able to die. But you really have to soak your whole body in the seawater, and then the water people will take the opportunity to chase and kill. The water people who are completely integrated into the seawater are shadowless and formless beings. And the Waterman still has infinite energy in the seawater. In that state, Qin Hai is definitely not his opponent. Fortunately, Qin Haisheng has other backhands, so he shouldn't really hang here. But if it's not good, it may really kill King Wanzi because of this. However, Qin Haisheng didn't have a good impression of Lao Wan originally, and he couldn't care about it so much at this time. So Qin Haisheng took advantage of the fact that the sea water above had not been completely watered, and he seized the time, and the flames released by his body rolled up the last 2 attribute bubbles around the Waterman, and he was ready to retreat. Pick up the Water Elemental Core +6. From the Waterman, when the Water Elemental Core accumulates 100 points, the Water Control ability can be activated. Pick up the Water Elemental Core +8. From the Waterman, when the Water Elemental Core accumulates 100 points, it can activate the Water Control ability. Detected that the host has accumulated 57 points of the same elemental core, Ice, will it merge to activate the Water Control ability? Well, can this thing be merged? Qin Haisheng couldn't help but be stunned when he heard the prompt. These 57 points of Ice Elemental Core were naturally picked up from the Iceman Bobby when he was in the Mutant Academy. Although the Iceman guy is relatively cold, he doesn't use his superpowers much when there are many people. But after a month, he still picked up some wool. It's just that the Iceman's ability is called Frozen, and to activate this superpower, you need to accumulate 600 Ice Elemental Cores. Therefore, Qin Haisheng did not expect to achieve this goal in a short period of time. Just now, Qin Haisheng obtained 44 water element cores from the Waterman in one go, and he thought that he would definitely not be able to awaken a new ability. But I didn't think about it. The system actually suggested that the Ice Elemental Core could be merged to awaken the Water Control ability together. It seems to be a bit of a loss. Qin Haisheng knew very well that Bobby's freezing ability and Morris's water control ability were not at the same level at all. The ability to freeze is developed to the end, and theoretically even time can be frozen. That's something that almost only God can do. So, now it's really reluctant for him to merge the Ice Elemental Core that took a month to pick up into the Water Elemental Core. However, thinking of the predicament he was facing now, Qin Haisheng had to make a decision. Merge. In the next moment, a series of prompts sounded. Merge successful. Congratulations to the host for accumulating 100 water, ice, elemental cores, and the water control ability is activated. Activation successful. Congratulations to the host for gaining the mutated water ability. Using this ability, you can mobilize the water element within a radius of 100 meters and transform it in 3 forms of water at will. The host can produce ice at -73 degrees Celsius, and it can be long-lived by injecting enough water to keep it alive. Because the host has awakened the power of the Flame King, he has obtained the miracle of combining fire and water. The host-controlled element of water can remain intrinsic under flame incineration. That is, the solid ice created by the host's ability will not be burned by flames below 3,600 degrees, and liquid water will not be vaporized. The flame released by the host can also be burned in water without extinguishing, and can decompose hydrogen and oxygen in water to support combustion. When he heard the effect of water and fire in the back, Qin Haisheng was stunned. After both the abilities of water and fire are awakened, it can still be like this. I must have recharged. How could there be such a good thing? The flame is not afraid of water, and my fire can burn more and more in the water, but it's okay. My water won't change its form in the fire. It's amazing. The waterman is just a garbage in front of me, and I'm afraid of him. Click dash. At the moment when Qin Haisheng had just activated his new ability, the waterman had already completely destroyed the originally condensed ice. The ice, which was already full of cracks, instantly shattered into countless tiny particles, mixed with the seawater above the passage that weighed an unknown number of tons, and smashed down. Seeing this, Flicker couldn't help but be shocked, hurriedly returned to Qin Haisheng's side, waved his hand to make a portal, and said, "Let's go." However, the waterman on the side smiled strangely and said, "Want to go? It's too late." As he spoke, he raised his hand and saw a thick wall of ice immediately erected in front of the portal. Although it is not very difficult to break this ice wall at this time. The seawater mixed with crushed ice had smashed less than 2 meters above their heads. It's just that the flickering ability is still very weak, and only one portal can be opened at a time. If you want to open a second portal, you can only close the original portal first, but then it will be even more too late. Under normal circumstances, if Qin Haisheng wanted to smash the ice wall in front of the portal before leaving, it would definitely be completely too late. At this moment, Qin Haisheng still maintained a state of flame. Once he was swallowed by this endless seawater, the consequences could be imagined. However, just when the waterman was laughing wildly and his eyes were full of despair, he saw Qin Haisheng waving his hand unhurriedly and shouted softly, "Give it to me." Then I saw that the endless seawater that was falling down from the passage suddenly froze into ice at this moment. Moreover, this time the seawater froze much faster than the previous operation of the waterman. In just an instant, as far as the eye could see, all the seawater was completely frozen, and there was no longer a drop of liquid water to be seen. Seeing this scene, the flickering and water people were all stunned. What's the situation? Why is the seawater frozen? Big brother, you're a mutant with the ability of flames, right? You're still on fire all over your body, okay? How can you still use the ability to freeze? This is not scientific. The waterman roared in disbelief, spitting a cloud of hot mist into the thick ice above. This is the high-temperature steam he uses his own ability to create. Although the waterman does not know the ability to flame, the temperature of the steam he spits can also reach hundreds of degrees, so that if it is sprayed on the person's body, it can instantly burn off a layer of skin for you. But when the steam spewed onto the ice above him, it was lonely, and the ice showed no sign of melting. On the contrary, the steam he spit out, after touching the ice, also quickly condensed into a circle of ripple-like ice lumps. The waterman was even more confused when he saw this. Even if it is a solid ice that he has made himself, it will melt rapidly when it is sprayed by such steam. How can this ice in front of him not be afraid of high temperatures at all? Is this Nima ice or stone? How did he know that Qin Haisheng's awakening was the ability to mutate water? Because more than half of the elemental cores at the time of awakening were ice elemental cores from Bobby, Qin Haisheng's ability was better at freezing. Even because of the ability to master the two attributes of water and fire at the same time, it has derived the effect of water and fire. Under this effect, the solid ice created by Qin Haisheng could remain in the flames for a period of time without changing its state, not to mention the steam of a few hundred degrees. The waterman looked at the solid ice that had completely frozen and no longer slid downward, and then looked at Qin Haisheng, who was still turning into flames, and a chill arose in his heart. And then he turned his whole body into a water form without saying a word, and turned around and threw himself towards the ice above his head. He didn't know if he would be able to escape through the ice above him after turning into water, but he knew. If he continues to stay here, he will probably die. Wanna go? It's too late. Qin Haisheng returned the words of this guy just now, and then popped out a fist-sized fireball and flew towards the waterman. The waterman obviously didn't care about this small fireball, and just shot a column of water to intercept it. However, in the next moment, a strange scene happened. I saw that the column of water hit the fireball, and instead of extinguishing the fireball burned more vigorously. This is nothing. The fireball not only burns more and more, but even burns all the way up the water column. In the blink of an eye, the water column was engulfed in flames and completely transformed into a pillar of fire, as if the waterman released gasoline instead of water. And the flame spread all the way, and soon burned down the pillar of fire to the waterman's body. The waterman still maintains the form of turning into water all over his body at the moment, which means that his whole body is the fuel of Qin Haisheng's flame. Without waiting for the waterman to react, the flames had already burned all over the waterman's body, and in an instant, the waterman's whole body was burning with raging fire, it seemed, and Qin Haisheng are like brothers in seconds. No, don't kill me, I don't want to die dash. From the raging flames, there was the scream of the water people in pain and despair. Although he had a fire burning on his body, he still had plenty of water in his body, and he didn't all ignite it all at once. I saw that the water in the waterman's body would be transformed into ice for a while, then into steam, and then back into a physical state. But no matter how he changed, he couldn't extinguish the flames on his body. Therefore, he could only cry and beg for mercy again and again. However, Qin Haisheng was unmoved. This guy directly put down the endless seawater just now, obviously wanting to take the opportunity to kill himself. And for a person who wants to kill himself, Qin Haisheng will definitely not be soft. Seeing that this guy still wanted to reflexively rush towards the alloy channel pipe wall on the side, he couldn't help frowning. It seems that this guy also wants to break through the wall of the channel pipe and enter the ocean. If he really gets into the sea, with his ability to mobilize water, it is equivalent to having infinite energy. He can even melt his body into the seawater, and it would be difficult to kill him like that. Qin Haisheng would not let this guy succeed, and with a movement of his mind, the fire element of the number of masters gathered, and in an instant, he turned into a tall flame giant and stopped in front of the waterman, and then threw him into his arms in the desperate roar of the waterman. After a few seconds, the wails of the waterman died down. In the arms of the flame giants, everything was burned into nothingness, and not even a single trace of ashes remained. However, when Qin Haisheng waved his hand to disperse the flame giant, he saw a huge blue bubble that glittered in place. Hey, the waterman still has bubbles falling after he dies. What a good person. I must have known that you were so good. I'm going to kill you sooner. Qin Haisheng sighed as he stepped forward and gently touched the bubble that looked a little strange. Pick up a water elemental crystal. The host can use this crystal to summon a water elemental golem to fight for you. Each summoning time is 1 hour, and the expired golem dissipates and the crystals return automatically. The host can also directly devour this crystal as a way to strengthen its control over the ability of the water element. Wow, that's a good thing. It can be used to summon water elemental golems, but I have infinite doppelganger abilities, and this summon puppet is of no great use, right? Or swallowed it directly? Qin Haisheng's current water superpower, if you don't calculate the effect of combining fire and water, it is estimated that it can still only be regarded as a 3rd-level ability. If you swallow this water elemental crystal, I don't know if you can raise it to the 4th level. Just thinking about it, Qin Haisheng still didn't immediately use this water element crystal. Let's take a look and talk about it. But then again, isn't it true that after every mutant dies, there will be a corresponding elemental crystal drop? If that's the case, then he can't miss the Alcatraz battle in a few days. In my memory, a lot of mutants died in that battle. In the original plot, even the only 5th-level mutant Phoenix girl was killed by Uncle Wolf. It's just that in this timeline, Phoenix female Jean Grey is not blackened, and it is estimated that she will not die, but even so, there must be a lot of elemental crystals that can be picked up. Let's go, we can go down. The sea here should not sink in a short time. After picking up the elemental crystals, Qin Hai beckoned towards the flicker. Then his mind moved, and the upper half of his body returned to the state of flesh, while the lower half of his body was still surrounded by flames. No way. When he turned into flames, his clothes burned to ashes again. If his whole body returns to his physical state, then he will die directly. He's not a demon girl, so he doesn't like to admit to others so much. If there is only one flicker, it doesn't matter, but there are many people down there. Qin Haisheng, who was half covered in flames and half humanoid, looked a little strange, a bit like a god in Greek mythology. Flickering and stunned, he looked at Qin Haisheng, who was floating towards him, and was stunned for a long time before he said, You killed him. Yes, Qin Hai said physiologically. He has killed me. If I don't kill him, will he stay for the new year? Flickering hesitated and said, But he is the one invited by Aunt Raven. You just killed him like this. Aunt Raven will be unhappy, right? Qin Haisheng pursed his lips and said, Anyway, I'm not her subordinate, and she can't control me, so what does it matter to me whether she's happy or not? It's not that I'm talking about you. You're not anyone's vassal. You usually have to have some of your own opinions. The witch just now obviously sold you. You shouldn't listen to her. Now it doesn't matter if she will be happy or not. What to do? Flickering remembered that the demon girl had forced her to come to the waterman, and she couldn't help but be silent for a while. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng knew that his words should have planted a nail in this girl's heart, but he didn't say anything provocative. Well, it's almost fine. I guess I'll be able to rebel against this girl next time, right? Seeing the flickering look of disobedience, Qin Haisheng smiled. With a move of reaching out, he mobilized the rich water vapor in the surrounding air, condensed under his feet into a thin ice covering the entire passage, and then stepped on it. Then he stretched out his hand to Flicker and said, Come on, I'll take you down. Flickering saw that Qin Haisheng's lower body was still burning with flames, but even stepping on the thin ice showed no sign of melting the thin ice, and he couldn't help but be surprised for a while. Then she stretched out her hand, interlocked her fingers with Qin Haisheng, tried to loosen the steel frame on the side, and carefully stepped on the thin ice. Unexpectedly, although the thin ice looked very thin, it carried the weight of 2 people and showed no signs of collapse. Qin Haisheng grabbed his sister's hand and said with a smile, Stand firm, we should be able to catch up with them soon. With that, as soon as his mind moved, the thin piece of ice broke off the part that had solidified on the alloy steel frame, and, under his control, it quickly floated down the passage. Qin Haisheng didn't have the ability to fly yet. Even if his whole body turned into flames, he could only temporarily float in the air at most, but that was not the same as flying. The thin ice he is making at the moment is because of the large area, but the mass is very light. Even if there are 2 people standing on it, the buoyancy it bears can greatly slow down the speed of their fall. As a result, they descended quickly, but not fast enough to kill a person. The image of the 2 of them standing arm in hand on the thin ice and flying down from the sky looks like a pair of mythical men and women. At this moment, the demonic girl and the others had just landed at the bottom of the passage. Quicksilver and Wanda, the siblings, have already taken the lead in it. The demon girl was still a little worried, and she didn't know what happened to the quarrel between Qin Haisheng and the waterman later. Will the seawater really be poured in? And at this moment, as soon as she looked up, through that piece of thin ice, I vaguely saw a man and a woman flying down hand in hand, and I couldn't help but look stunned. So, was that Oriental kid killed by the waterman? Alas, a handsome young man. He is really blind. But it deserves it. Who told him not to obey my orders? In such a place, to provoke the water people, Isn't that to seek their own death? I don't blame her for being blind. Mainly through a layer of ice, she couldn't see what the two people on it looked like. And Qin Haisheng also restrained the flames in his lower body as much as possible, so as not to accidentally burn to flicker. Looking through the thin ice, I thought the man on it was wearing a pair of red pants. Plus, she saw that the two of them were stepping on a piece of ice and falling down, so she naturally thought that the only one who could control the ice was the waterman. That's why the demon girl thought that Qin Haisheng had been killed. Shouldn't there be 3 people coming down now? Seeing that the other party was about to land, the demon girl hurriedly exited the elevator passage and then asked in a loud voice, "Is the water up there sealed? Won't rush in again. How's the Huaxia kid?" As a result, a familiar voice could be heard from above. "Isn't that Huaxia kid coming?" Subsequently, when the thin ice fell to a height of only a few meters from the ground, the 2 people above kicked hard under their feet, and the thin ice under their feet fell down rapidly, and the pieces broke apart in the middle of the way, turning into a puff of mist and dissipating away. But the 2 of them jumped up about half a meter to a height with the force of the shock, and then slowly fell to the ground. It wasn't until this moment that the demonic girl saw clearly. The man standing on the ice just now was not a waterman, but Qin Haisheng. It's just that Qin Haisheng's appearance is also very strange. The lower half of the body is made of flames, but the upper half of the body is not a single strand. It's magical. The demon girl looked at the 2 of them in a daze, and then looked up at the top of the passage. But he didn't see the shadow of the 3rd person. She asked, a little surprised, "How could it be you? What about Morris? Dead?" Qin Haisheng had no intention of concealing it. Moreover, the waterman is not a member of the Mutant Brotherhood. I believe that as long as it does not affect the plan to rescue Magneto, the demon girl will not turn her face for a waterman and Qin Haisheng. The demon girl exclaimed, looked up again, and asked, "You killed Maurice. Won't his power dissipate when he dies?" "How?" "The seawater didn't pour down." Qin Haisheng spread his hands and said, "Do you still expect that guy to block the seawater for us? Just now you really let Clarice stay alone with him. It is estimated that he will only coerce Clarice to leave with him, and he will care if you live or die. Good thing I saw through that guy's dirty thoughts, and the ability to control water was awakened at a critical moment, so the seawater above is sealed by me with my ability, so Raven-senpai doesn't need to worry. Just go and rescue Magneto." When the demon girl heard this, she just stared at Qin Haisheng in a daze, and she didn't know what to say for a while. Before, when she stopped Qin Haisheng from following the Flash, she was scolded by the stinky boy. At the time, she was still very annoyed, but now that she learned that the waterman was killed by Qin Haisheng, what was even more outrageous? Obviously, this guy has a fire superpower, and now he has awakened an ability to control water. This made her can't help but have a new understanding of Qin Haisheng's strength. As we all know, mutants can only awaken one superpower in their lifetime. As for some people who seem to have multiple superpowers, they are actually just digging deep into their own abilities. For example, the waterman's ability to control water, he can not only control water, but also turn water into ice and steam. But it's essentially just manipulating water. But if a person has 2 superpowers, water and fire, it is unheard of. Could it be? This kid is the true chosen one, the child of destiny who can lead mutants to world domination. Unconsciously, the demon girl looked at Qin Haisheng with a little respect in her eyes. At a depth of 1,200 meters, a deep-sea prison has been built entirely of metal. At this moment, Quicksilver and the Wanda brothers have rushed to the 5th floor of the prison. According to intelligence, Magneto and the saber-toothed tiger were imprisoned on this level. Along the way, the deep-sea prison guards lay on the ground crookedly. However, it appears that the guards were only unconscious, and no one died or was seriously injured. On the ground, some bullets were also sporadically dropped. However, the mutants who broke in were not injured. This is all thanks to the strength of the 2 siblings, Wanda and Quicksilver. Under Quicksilver's super speed, the speed of the bullet is a joke in his eyes. In Avengers 2, Quicksilver actually kills a bullet, which is also a joke. Therefore, The bullets fired by the prison guards at their brothers and sisters along the way were easily dodged by Quicksilver. And then, Quicksilver rushes to the guards with her sister, and Wanda uses her illusion to make them fall asleep inexplicably. In this way, he easily broke all the way to the 5th layer of the deep sea prison. But when they got here, even this tough brother and sister duo was blocked by the metal door that was half a meter thick. Because Quicksilver's speed was too fast, the other people who followed behind were all useless, and they were playing soy sauce all the way. But Qin Haisheng is quite happy. Because Quicksilver frequently uses superpowers, he drops a lot of large and round attribute bubbles along the way. It's still the kind of velocity attribute bubble that contains dozens of points in a bubble, which is simply a large amount of full. Finally, when he followed to the 3rd layer, Qin Haisheng finally saw a different bubble. It was a gray bubble the size of Longan that he had never seen before. Thinking that the prison guards along the way were all solved by the 2 brothers and sisters of Quicksilver and Wanda, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but feel a little excited. No way. Wanda's Pyro ability, has it finally dropped bubbles? Pick up the power of Chaos Core +3. From Scarlet Witch, accumulate 1200 power of Chaos Core, have a chance to activate Chaos Magic. SHHHH. Hearing this prompt, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but gasp. Don't be so mad. It actually took 1200 Chaos Force cores and... Or is there just a chance to activate Chaos Magic? That means that you may not be able to activate it at that time. Qin Haisheng knew that the Scarlet Witch's Chaos Magic was very good, and once she went berserk, she could wipe out the X-Men and the Avengers in an instant. But it's still too difficult to obtain. If Wanda is the little naughty bubble battle queen, Qin Haisheng can still look forward to it. But Qin Haisheng and Wanda had been together for several days, and it was the first time they had picked up the attribute bubbles she dropped. So, Qin Haisheng estimates that even if he marries Wanda's sister home, he won't be able to save so many Chaos Power Cores for 10 years and 8 years. Forget it. If I can really marry her home, then her cow fork is my cow fork, and there is no need to copy her ability. Eat soft rice occasionally, isn't it also very fragrant? Sure enough, when Qin Haisheng chased all the way to the 5th layer and saw Wanda, he didn't pick up the 2nd gray bubble. On the contrary, he picked up several bubbles of the speed attribute again. At this point, Qin Haisheng's speed has improved by leaps and bounds, and he estimates, although my current speed is not as good as Quicksilver, I should be able to easily break through the speed of sound. Faced with the closed metal door, there was nothing anyone else could do. Qin Haisheng could have tried to melt it with flames, but the demon girl didn't let Qin Haisheng do that, but walked forward calmly. Then I saw her appearance change rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, she completely changed into the appearance of the Warden of the Deep Sea. According to the demon girl's investigation, the door of the 5th layer of this deep sea prison, in addition to the Warden, there should be another person below who can open it. It's just that all the panting prison guards under the deep sea prison have all made Wanda hypnotize and fall asleep. Naturally, she didn't bother to interrogate them one by one. But she knew that the Warden must have the authority to open the door. To open this door, you need to verify the fingerprint, iris, and voice of the person with permission. This is probably the highest level of validation available today. Even if you can gouge out the eyes of the person with authority and cut off his fingers, if the contrast between the voices is incorrect, it will not be verified. But the demon girl's transfiguration is quite terrifying, and it is a complete feature that can fundamentally transform into another person, and even the voice can be perfectly reproduced. Sure enough, when the demon girl transformed into the appearance of the Warden, she quickly passed the security scan, and then a soft beep sound was heard, and the heavy metal door slowly rose. Roar. The moment the metal door opened, a tiger roar piercing through the golden cracked stone suddenly sounded. Then I saw a man with blonde hair, a beard, and red eyes, waving a pair of hands with sharp nails, and pounced on the demon girl. Before the man arrived, the fierce aura like a beast had already hit his face. The demon girl was shocked when she saw this, and said coquettishly, "Victor, it's me, you're crazy." The flicker beside Qin Haisheng also shouted in shock, "Father." Belch. So, is this guy the flickering adoptive father saber-toothed tiger, Victor? But why isn't this guy smart? The demon girl thought that the saber-toothed tiger had mistaken her for the warden, so she attacked her in anger, so she quickly restored her original form. And, presumably, she was still worried that she would return to her original appearance and put on her clothes again, and the saber-toothed tiger would not recognize her, so. This time, she's the same blue, mysteriously patterned skin again. However, the saber-toothed tiger did not stop because she changed her appearance, but waved the tiger claws without stopping and grabbed the head of the demon girl. Whoosh dash. The critical moment had to be Quicksilver. After he found out that something was wrong, he rushed over quickly and gently took the demon girl with him, pulling the demon girl out more than 10 meters away, letting the saber-toothed tiger's claws fall into the air. However, the saber-toothed tiger had no intention of stopping and immediately turned around fiercely and pounced towards Wanda, who was closest to the moment. Wanda was obviously a little scared, but she was still raising her hands, destroying her spiritual power, trying to bring the saber-toothed tiger into the illusion. It's just that, as soon as she tried it, she discovered the saber-toothed tiger's consciousness was in chaos and her tried and tested illusion skills were completely useless in front of the saber-toothed tiger. Fortunately, her probability magic still worked. I saw that when the saber-toothed tiger's claws were about to grab Wanda's body, his feet slipped inexplicably, his body staggered, and his claws were crooked, clinging to Wanda's side, grabbing on the metal wall and suddenly grabbing a spark on the wall. And several scratches half an inch deep appeared. Ping dash. Seeing that this guy was actually bullying his sister, Quicksilver immediately rushed up in annoyance and slammed into the saber-toothed tiger's body at super high speed, causing this guy to fly as if he had been blown by an invisible rhinoceros, and flew directly upside down more than 10 meters away. But Quicksilver is not known for its attack power other than its speed. The way he attacks people seems to be the same as hitting people. And the saber-toothed tiger, which has a super self-healing ability, although it looks like it was hit very embarrassed, it didn't look like it was injured at all, and after turning over and jumping, it rushed towards the demon girl with red eyes. "Father, what's wrong with you? Wake up." At this time, Flicker rushed over and stood in front of the demon girl, calling out to the saber-toothed tiger with an anxious face, hoping to awaken the other party's senses. Ho dash. Seeing the sudden flash, the saber-toothed tiger paused slightly, as if the flickering caused some fluctuations in his brain. But only a moment later, the saber-toothed tiger suddenly opened its mouth wide, revealing 2 rows of snow-white sword teeth, and then pounced towards the flash. Boom dash. At this moment, a fireball shot out by Qin Haisheng's blocking hand smashed heavily on the saber-toothed tiger's chest. The fireball exploded suddenly, and the kinetic energy generated in an instant knocked the saber-toothed tiger far to the ground. This time, the saber-toothed tiger was finally injured a little. I saw that the clothes on his upper body were almost burned, the thick chest hair and the flesh and blood were burned, and the air emitted a pungent smell of burning. It's just that, under the effect of super self-healing, the charred flesh began to heal rapidly in the blink of an eye. However, the saber-toothed tiger seemed to feel no pain at all, and as soon as his body flicked, he pounced on Qin Haisheng again. Encountering this kind of unbeatable Xiaoqiang will indeed be a headache. Qin Haisheng knew that the saber-toothed tiger, like Wolverine, had super self-healing and regeneration abilities, and was almost immortal. If you want to kill such a person, it is useless to pierce him in the heart with a knife or through his head with a shot. It has to be dismembered or even broken to ashes. Of course, with Qin Haisheng's Flame Monarch ability, it was actually not difficult to kill the saber-toothed tiger. But the question is, this is Flicker's adoptive father. He really killed him. Wouldn't the flickering girl hate him for the rest of his life? Sure enough, just when Qin Haisheng was hesitating about how to deal with the saber-toothed tiger, the flicker behind him suddenly pounced on him, and he pleaded bitterly. "Qin, please save my father, don't kill him, okay?" Qin Haisheng threw out a fireball again, knocking the saber-toothed tiger back, and at the same time secretly screamed in his heart that it was a pity. If you kill the saber-toothed tiger, won't you be able to get another elemental crystal? Saying, if this saber-toothed tiger dies, what elemental crystals will it drop? Is it a super regenerative ability crystal, or is it a beast ability crystal? If it's beast energy, then forget it. Qin Haisheng felt that it was okay for him to occasionally turn into a flame or something, but if he turned into a fierce beast, it would be too damaging to his image. Ping dash. The saber-toothed tiger was once again blown to the ground by the fireball. And this time, Qin Haisheng's shot was a little heavier, and he saw that half of the saber-toothed tiger's arms were about to be blown to a bloody blur. However, when the saber-toothed tiger roared and got up, he saw the burnt flesh on his shoulders falling off. Among them, pink flesh began to divide and breed rapidly, but in just a few breaths, the piece of flesh that had been blown up had already recovered as before. At the same time, a purple bubble also fell from the saber-toothed tiger's body. Qin Haisheng's eyes suddenly lit up. It's exploded. Finally something good has come out. So Qin Haisheng didn't wait for the saber-toothed tiger to pounce again. He had already rushed forward first and gave the other party another blow, blowing off one of the saber-toothed tiger's legs. Although the saber-toothed tiger is very strong, it is only a third-level mutant after all, and it is not Qin Haisheng's opponent in the first place. In addition, his mind was not clear at the moment, so in the face of Qin Haisheng's attack, he was simply powerless to fight back. I didn't burst any more bubbles, then come again. Qin Haisheng was a little angry, and then the other leg of the saber-toothed tiger was also blown off by the fireball. This time, another bubble finally dropped from the saber-toothed tiger, but it was a colorless basic attribute bubble. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng did not dislike it and picked up the two bubbles one after another. The base attribute bubble has 6 defense attributes, and the purple bubble is pick up plus 7 hyper regeneration cores. From the saber-toothed tiger, accumulate 300 hyper regeneration cores to activate hyper regeneration cores. Sure enough, it's super regenerative power. Good stuff. Qin Haisheng now has the ability to transform into fire and water and is basically immune to most physical attacks. But he felt that it wasn't enough because he can't keep his body of fire or water all the time, and once he returns to his physical state, he may still hang up if he is attacked. And even if he preferred not to maintain his non-human form all the time, there were some attacks that he was not immune to. For example, Storm Girl's lightning attack or Wanda's chaos magic, he is not immune to. But if you can awaken another super regenerative ability, it will be much more stable. It's just that this ability core doesn't seem to be very explosive. After such a long time, the saber-toothed tiger was beaten into this bird, and it only exploded once, so it reached 300 points. You can't put the saber-toothed tiger back and forth several times. But if he really does this, I guess the flickering girl will have to fight with him. Damn, why is this guy sick again? At this time, the saber-toothed tiger's 2 legs were broken, and even if it had the ability to regenerate super, it did not recover immediately. Seeing that it was safe for the time being, the demon girl stepped forward in a bit of anger and kicked the saber-toothed tiger before she looked at Qin Haisheng with a frown and said, "This guy has been brainwashed many times, and every now and then he goes crazy. But this time it seems that the situation is particularly serious, and I am afraid that I will not be able to sober up for a while. We've got to get Eric out first. You're the only one here who can restrain him, so I'm going to trouble you. Watch him first, don't let him hurt anyone again. Go back and wait to get out of here, and then find a way to cure his brain. Anyway, he can't die, as long as he resists. You can break his leg and let him recover slowly first." Qin Haisheng was overjoyed in his heart. And this is a good thing. Then I don't abuse him, I beat him just to save him, and I want to understand it if I want to flash a girl, right? Thinking of this, he also glanced at Flicker. I saw the latter nod with red eyes and said, "Qin, don't worry. Why can't you let your father hurt others? His physique is very special. As long as you don't hit his vital point, you shouldn't be able to die." Qin Haisheng nodded and said, "That's the only way to go. After that, with a flick of his hand, 2 more fireballs smashed on the saber-toothed tiger's legs, and the guy's newly grown bones were blown off again, and there was a scorched smell floating in the air. This guy's body hair is too heavy, and every time I blow him up with a fireball, it feels like a burning pig's hair. The shapeshifter and several mutants continue to advance to the depths of the 5th layer of the deep-sea prison to rescue Magneto. Only Qin Haisheng and Flicker were left here, looking at the saber-toothed tiger. Originally, the demon girl beckoned Flicker to come with her, but Flicker refused after thinking about it, saying that she would guard her stepfather here. This made Qin Haisheng a little disappointed. Originally, I thought that I could get more wool from the saber-toothed tiger and give him an ice and fire package or something. However, Flashing is looking at it here. How can he be embarrassed to deliberately break the devil's father again? So, Qin Haisheng had no choice but to blow up his legs again whenever the saber-toothed tiger's legs healed and wanted to jump up again to hurt people. At most, he occasionally pretended to miss and did not blow up the saber-toothed tiger's leg, although the flesh and blood on the saber-toothed tiger's leg were blurred, but when he could still get up, he added 2 more fireballs. However, this kind of thing can't be done too much, otherwise it will inevitably make Flicker suspect that Qin Haisheng is deliberately torturing her father. In addition, Qin Haisheng also took the time to pick up a prison guard's clothes and put them on his body. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to keep his lower body in flames. This is really strange enough, and he is very worried that it will affect his handsome image in the hearts of the girls. About 6 or 7 minutes later, when the demon girl and her party returned here with a somewhat wilted Magneto, Qin Haisheng had already brushed out a total of 37 points of super regenerative ability core from the saber-toothed tiger. But this is still far from brushing out the super regeneration ability. Qin Haisheng can only complain that the demon shape girl came back too quickly. But then he pondered. It seems that this ability is not only possessed by saber-toothed tigers, but may also be able to be brushed out by other mutants. As far as Qin Haisheng knows, Uncle Wolf must have it too. It's just that during the days of the Mutant Academy, Uncle Wolf treated him well. How could Qin Haisheng not be able to torture Uncle Wolf in order to brush out this ability? Oh yes, and Deadpool. If you want to say that the mutant with the strongest super regenerative ability, it is estimated that Uncle Wolf and Saber-Tooth Tiger are not as good as Deadpool. Wait until you have a chance or you can try it on that guy. Anyway, that guy's mouth is very cheap, and it won't be too much of a psychological burden to torture that thing. Perfect. Brush dash. Seeing that everyone had arrived and Magneto had been rescued, Flicker immediately raised his hand and opened a portal. On the other side of the portal, there is a small island nearby. This is a previously planned route out. Before they could reach the deep-sea prison, the helicopter made a special stop on this deserted island. The purpose is to let the Flicker stay here for a while, and then after rescuing Magneto, set this place as the teleportation location. This small island is less than 50 kilometers away from the deep-sea prison, and with the ability to flicker, it can naturally do it. As the portal opened, the group quickly passed through the portal, and in one step, they crossed from the bottom of the sea at a depth of more than 1,000 meters to an island dozens of kilometers away. Qin Haisheng broke the saber-toothed tiger's legs and arms, and then carried the back collar of this guy and carried the portal he stepped over. Gotta lift the back collar because this guy bites. The saber-toothed tiger not only has a pair of sharp tiger claws, but also has a sharp tiger tooth. If he really bites it, even if Qin Haisheng's defense power far exceeds that of ordinary mutants, I am afraid that he will have to bite off a piece of meat. As soon as the group stepped onto the island, they heard a rumbling sound overhead. It was the medium-sized helicopter they were in that flew over. After getting on the plane, Qin Haisheng refused the red tank that he wanted to help and still continued to watch over the saber-toothed tiger, breaking the other party's hands and feet every minute and picking up 1 or 2 attribute bubbles from time to time, which was simply a lot of fun. At the same time, he was also glad that he had followed the demon girl on this trip. Otherwise, if he stayed in the helicopter with the red tank, how could he have a chance to awaken a superpower? After Magneto ate something on the plane, his complexion improved a lot. Then he began to show his heroic demeanor, shook hands cordially with everyone present, and thanked everyone for rescuing him. When it was Qin Haisheng's turn to be here, he was even more like a kind old man, showing a kind smile, patting Qin Haisheng's shoulder, and saying, "I heard Raven mention you that you have awakened 2 superpowers. Not bad. You are the pride of our new humanity. I hope." As a result, Qin Haisheng didn't wait for this old guy to brainwash himself, so he hurriedly took a stand and said, "Mr. Eric, I am a student of Professor Charles." Magneto was slightly stunned, and then looked at Qin Haisheng with a more kind smile and said, "It's okay. I have a lot of respect for the professor and I are still best friends, but we just have conflicting ideas." Qin Haisheng interrupted him again and said, "Professor Charles is sometimes a bit of a virgin, but if I had to take one of the 2 of you, I would still be on Professor Charles's side. To say something offensive, Mr. Eric, if your parents hadn't died in concentration camps and they had always been just ordinary people, would you still think that for the sake of mutants, you should exterminate ordinary humans all over the world?" Magneto finally couldn't laugh this time, and his face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Qin Haisheng's words were actually not for Magneto, because he knows how stubborn this old guy is. Once he decides on something, he can't pull back the 9 dragons. Therefore, Qin Haisheng's words were addressed to Wanda, Quicksilver, and Flash. Because of the saber-toothed tiger, it won't be able to do it for a while. But the Wanda siblings had already agreed to join the X-Men. But after seeing Magneto, Qin Haisheng found that the brother and sister's expressions were obviously a little excited. Fortunately, they haven't recognized Magneto yet, and Magneto probably doesn't know that these 2 gifted twins are suspected of being related to him. Most of the shapeshifters haven't found a chance to talk to him about it. Therefore, Qin Haisheng had to do something to strengthen the belief of the 2 brothers and sisters. Otherwise, once Magneto knew the identity of the twins, even if he knew that most of these 2 people were not his own children, he would definitely not deny it. This old guy will do anything for his cause. In the original plot, the demon girl who has been with him all her life can be abandoned by him after losing her superpowers, and what is it to coax 2 children? Magneto was furious by Qin Haisheng's words, but with his identity, it was naturally impossible to discuss the issue of what concept he had with a young man who was less than 20 years old. And, no matter what, Qin Haisheng can be regarded as the benefactor who just saved him, and it is even more difficult to turn his face with Qin Haisheng at this time, so he can only sit aside with a dark face and stop talking. The helicopter landed next to a small fishing village near Luoshan Chicken. Next, Magneto will lead his men to the makeshift camp of the Mutant Brotherhood. If nothing else, they will soon launch the Battle of Alcatraz. Qin Haisheng really wanted to go around the Brotherhood's camp again, and it was said that there were nearly 100 mutants over there. However, except for the few people present, the remaining mutants of the Brotherhood should all be cannon fodder below the 2nd level. Moreover, Qin Haisheng had just made his position clear to Magneto, and at this time he took the initiative to come up, which was really a little unreasonable. Of course, the most important thing is that he has to hurry up and abduct the Wanda siblings, saying that nothing can give them a chance to be brainwashed by Magneto. So after getting off the plane, Qin Haisheng glanced at Wanda and offered to leave. Magneto didn't offer to keep it, and after thinking about it for a while, he actually offered to let Qin Haisheng take the saber-toothed tiger to the Mutant Academy as well. The reason is that the saber-toothed tiger is in this situation, and probably only Professor Charles can cure him. The saber-toothed tiger has been brainwashed many times, which has caused brain problems and has had several out-of-control experiences. However, in the past, most of them were able to recover quickly after being restrained, but this time. After all this time, I'm still confused, and I'm still like a mad dog. It's really not curable, and it's estimated that Magneto is already thinking about destroying it humanely. Qin Haisheng was shocked at the time. This saber-toothed tiger used to work against the Mutant Academy, and now he wants to find Professor Charles for treatment when he is sick. Isn't this too much to take Professor Charles seriously? But Qin Haisheng estimates that Charles will really treat this guy. There is no way that Professor X is so frattern. What can you do with him? Qin Haisheng didn't mind taking the saber-toothed tiger back to the Mutant Academy. After all, it's a long way to go, and if he wants to restrain the saber-toothed tiger and prevent him from hurting people, he has to keep breaking his hands and feet. Maybe when he gets to the Mutant Academy, he'll brush out this super regenerative ability. So Qin Haisheng just hesitated for a moment and agreed to Magneto. As for whether Professor Charles will treat this saber-toothed tiger at that time. So what's the matter with him? However, what Qin Haisheng didn't expect was that at this time, Flicker suddenly said, "Why don't I send you back?" Qin Haisheng couldn't help but be stunned. He wanted to have more contact with the flickering girl, but the problem was, there is a flicker, then they return to the Mutant Academy. It is simply a blink of an eye, so how can he have a chance to gather the wool of the saber-toothed tiger again? So he hurriedly excused himself and said, No. That's a big trouble for you. No hassle." Flickering glanced at the saber-toothed tiger that was held in Qin Haisheng's hand, with broken hands and feet, but with his teeth and claws, and said with a sad expression, "Anyway, I only need to open the portal a few more times to get there, so that my father can suffer a little less. Even if it is a little troublesome, it is nothing." Qin Haisheng was speechless. I knew that he wouldn't agree to take the saber-toothed tiger to the Mutant Academy. Seeing that he couldn't stop the flickering kindness, Qin Haisheng felt that he had lost a lot this time, so he didn't want to cheat Magneto, and suddenly turned his head to Magneto and asked, "Victor's condition seems to be serious. What if Professor Charles can't be cured?" Magneto's face changed for a moment, but he still said truthfully, "No. If it can't be cured, you can dispose of it." With that, he flicked his sleeves and left. Qin Haisheng noticed that the flickering face on the side had turned pale, and there was a faint hatred in her gaze when she looked at Magneto. And this is the effect that Qin Haisheng wants, if nothing else. This time, regardless of whether the saber-toothed tiger can be cured or not, it is possible to counter a flashing girl first. An hour later, Qin Haisheng saw the Statue of Liberty from a distance. From Los Angeles, it's almost 4,000 kilometers away. And flickering requires at least 40 portals. This can be exhausting. The reason why she didn't teleport directly to the Mutant Academy was because Flicker had never been there, so she could only let the portal open in the city closest to the Mutant Academy. The rest of the way can only be passed by car, which is not a choice. Fortunately, it's not far from here to the Mutant Academy in Westchester. It's just that with a saber-toothed tiger like a mad dog, it will be very troublesome to call a taxi. So Qin Haisheng asked Quicksilver to come forward and rent a business car, and the group drove to the Mutant Academy by themselves. Fortunately, Qin Haisheng took Wanda to the betting club before and won a lot of money. Wanda still has quite a few left. As for the money Qin Haisheng carried, that must have burned out along with the clothes. He felt that his flame ability was a bit of a loser. Every time I work hard, there is nothing left in my body. Not to mention the loser, he couldn't see people after the war, which affected his image a lot. He thought he had to see if he could find a garment that wasn't afraid of fire, or if you upgrade your abilities in the future, I don't know if you can protect your clothes from being burned when you turn into a flame. Like the Phantom Cat's ability to walk, when activating the ability, her carry-on will have the effect of penetrating matter with her. When Quicksilver drove into the Mutant Academy, it was the time for the senior students in the academy to take their ability training classes. Seeing a strange car driving towards the entrance of the college building, the students immediately looked at it curiously. Then I saw two girls who were so beautiful that they didn't look like they jumped out of the car one after another, and suddenly, the boys in the room had their eyes straight. The Phantom Cat and the little naughty girl in the academy are also relatively beautiful girls, but compared to the two in front of me, it seems to feel a little worse. Aren't these two beauties new to the academy? But then, when Qin Haisheng came down from behind with his saber-toothed tiger, the students present were all shocked. What's the situation? Isn't this the only ordinary person in the academy before? Later, after suddenly waking up, he followed Uncle Wolf on a mission and disappeared. He actually ran away with the demon girl who had been working against the X-Men, and now why did he return to the academy? And also, what does he have to do with those two little beauties? This kid can't just run out and be kidnapped, right? Qin Dash. Seeing Qin Haisheng coming back, the phantom cat greeted happily, and then couldn't help but jump out of the training ground and run towards Qin Haisheng. It's just that. After running a few steps, her gaze swept over Wanda and Flicker, and she unconsciously slowed down. Try to be as reserved as possible and say, "Qin, you're back. I thought something had happened to you." Qin Haisheng was a little embarrassed. His mobile phone has long been burned to ashes, okay. Hell if he can get through. But before Qin Haisheng could answer, he saw that Bobby Guy chased after him, pulled the sleeve of the phantom cat, and said with a vigilant face, "Katie, be careful." He's wrong. The man he was holding seemed to be Magneto's #1 thug, the saber-toothed tiger. After all, the saber-toothed tiger is the flickering father-in-law. Qin Haisheng feels that he should save some face for the saber-toothed tiger, so. After arriving at the academy, he no longer carried the back of the saber-toothed tiger directly as before, and walked with the saber-toothed tiger like a dead dog. And for several hours in a row, the saber-toothed tiger was constantly interrupted by Qin Haisheng, and even his super regeneration ability began to be a little unable to recover in time. In the beginning, after both legs are broken, the saber-toothed tiger will recover in a maximum of a minute or two. But now, 10 minutes may not heal a broken bone. Moreover, his energy became worse and worse, and before getting out of the car, Qin Haisheng just knocked on the back of the saber-toothed tiger's neck, and this guy was temporarily unconscious. Therefore, at this time, Qin Haisheng and the saber-toothed tiger did not look like enemies, but like close friends. Bobby had seen the saber-toothed tiger, so at this time, seeing Qin Haisheng and the saber-toothed tiger appear in the academy together, it was naturally inevitable that he would be a little nervous. Qin Haisheng smiled and said, "Don't worry, he is indeed a saber-toothed tiger, but now he is just a poor old man who came to seek medical treatment." The saber-toothed tiger is a little older than Wolverine, more than 100 years old, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with saying that he is an old man. Then, Qin Haisheng also shook the two broken arms of the saber-toothed tiger and continued. "Look, his arms and legs are broken. What is there to be afraid of?" Bobby couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this. That's not right. Isn't this guy like Uncle Wolf, who has the ability to regenerate super regeneration? In the Academy's treatment room, Wolverine Logan looked at the haggard saber-toothed tiger lying on the bed, and his mood was extremely complicated for a while. Their half-brothers fell in love with each other and killed each other all their lives. Originally, Logan thought that he hated this brother to death and more than once longed to kill this bastard with his own hands. But at this moment, seeing the saber-toothed tiger looking half-dead, he felt a heartache inexplicably. Or maybe that's what it feels like to be connected by blood. Charles did not refuse to treat the saber-toothed tiger's injuries. Even though he knew that he had cured this guy one moment, the saber-toothed tiger might swing his tiger claws to his throat the next moment, Professor Charles still did not hesitate to make a move. And his method of treating the saber-toothed tiger is also very simple, without any physical contact. He just sat in a wheelchair and closed his eyes, and started the treatment in the air. As for how to treat it, others can't understand it at all. Just watching the saber-toothed tiger lying there, his expression kept changing. One moment the face is hideous, the next time the face is full of pain, and the next moment is smirking smirk. How does Qin Haisheng feel that this guy is completely hopeless? Originally, the saber-toothed tiger would only roar angrily, and when it saw someone, it would want to go up and scratch it twice. But being treated like this by Professor Charles, it seems that my brain has been completely broken. After more than 10 minutes of torture, Professor Charles's bald head was already covered with beads of sweat. Finally, the saber-toothed tiger, whose eyes had been closed, suddenly opened his eyes. The bloodshot red in his eyes had faded a lot, but the fierceness and violence in his eyes had not diminished at all. He swept his gaze, and when he saw a few people in the room, he immediately jumped up from the bed with a rub. At the same time, his body bowed slightly. Sharp nails grew quickly on the 10 fingers on his hands, and his mouth opened slightly, revealing Sinhan's sharp teeth. His whole person looks. It's like a tiger trying to hunt its prey. Father. Seeing this, Flicker hurriedly stepped forward, grabbed the saber-toothed tiger's arm, and said in an almost pleading tone, "You were put in a deep-sea prison by the Federation, and your consciousness was completely confused when you got out, yes. It was Professor Charles who saved you. Don't hurt them." In fact, Flicker also knows that this is a mutant academy with a cloud of masters, and if her stepfather really wants to commit murder here, it is impossible to hurt others. No one else needs to make a move. As long as Charles uses his psychic ability, the saber-toothed tiger will immediately have to kneel. But she also knows how strong her self-esteem is as a stepfather. If you tell him, "There are too many cattle here, if you keep a low profile and be careful of being beaten," then it is estimated that even if the saber-toothed tiger knows that he can't beat others, he will have to make a fight. Sure enough, he knew his father and daughter, but in fact, the saber-toothed tiger who had regained his mind also knew that he couldn't beat the few people in front of him at all, and all that was missing at this time was a step. "As soon as I heard that Professor Charles had cured him, why don't you hurry up and get off the donkey?" So he hurriedly put away his tiger claws and seemed to bow slightly to Professor Charles respectfully and said, "Thank you, Professor, for going out of your way to save me that. I won't bother." After that, he immediately threw a glance at Flicker and said, "Clarice, let's go." Flickering hesitated for a moment, looked at Qin Haisheng on the side with a tangled expression, and then lowered his head and said, "Father, I think you'd better not follow Master Eric. He doesn't pay any attention to you at all." Fart. Hearing this, the saber-toothed tiger immediately glared angrily and said, "You know what? Eric and I are like-minded friends. How could he not value me?" As he spoke, he glanced at Qin Haisheng with some confusion, and the tiger claws on his hands subconsciously stretched out again. Who is this kid, and why do I feel that he smells so disgusting and seems to have a deep hatred for me? Flickering his mouth wide open, he couldn't speak for a while. It seems that the father-in-law is in a state of madness, and he doesn't know anything at all. His legs and arms, he didn't know that he had been blown off hundreds of times by Qin Haisheng with fireballs along the way. Didn't he have a deep hatred? Although Flicker felt that Qin Haisheng had no choice in order to protect everyone. At the same time, it was also done to help my father-in-law. But this matter must not be known to the father-in-law, otherwise he will have to fight with Qin Haisheng with his father's fiery temper. But the father-in-law definitely can't beat Qin Haisheng, isn't that just looking for abuse? Thereupon, at this time, she didn't care about persuading the saber-toothed tiger. In order to prevent the two of them from PK on the spot, she hurriedly waved her hand to make a portal and said, "Father, let's go. Mr. Eric is still waiting for your news." Okay, let's go back first." The saber-toothed tiger glanced at Qin Haisheng with some confusion and disgust, and then at Professor Charles and Logan next to him, making sure that with these two people, he would definitely not let him oppress a student. So he stepped into the portal in a stupid step. The purple portal slowly vanished, and the flickering and saber-toothed tigers left the Mutant Academy completely. It was only at this time that Professor Charles, who was a little tired, looked at Qin Haisheng's body, showed a look of surprise, and said, "You've awakened 2 more superpowers." Qin Haisheng's expression froze, and he didn't know what to say for a while. This Professor X is really terrifying, and in front of him, there seems to be no secret to hide. Qin Haisheng hadn't used his superpowers in front of him, but the professor knew everything just by looking at him. Is the psychic ability so good? Qin Haisheng felt that he wanted it more. Logan's eyes widened on the side, and he said, "How is it possible? He has awakened 3 superpowers by himself?" Superpowers. Isn't there only one for everyone, and mutants can only dig deep into their own abilities at most? Shouldn't all of his 3 abilities be related to flames? What Uncle Wolf said is almost a consensus among people about the abilities of mutants. Therefore, he was a little unable to understand, how could Qin Haisheng have so many superpowers? Charles shook his head slightly and said, "He's different. His 3 superpowers aren't the same kind at all. In fact, mutants have a variety of abilities, and so far, no 2 people have been found to have exactly the same abilities. Or Qin's ability, that is, it is not impossible to have a variety of superpowers. Logan's mouth opened wide in surprise, not even noticing that the cigar in his mouth had dropped. Can you still have this ability? The ability to have multiple superpowers. Poof. Looks like that's a kind of ability, right? It's just that this is too much. And let other mutants live. Qin Haisheng didn't want to continue on this issue, so he hurriedly changed the topic and said, "Why didn't you see Scott and Mr. Alaro?" Charles's expression became serious and he said, "They're going to investigate mutant gene suppressants, and it's been going on a lot lately, and some mutants are marching." Seeing Professor Charles's serious appearance, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but be puzzled. If according to his previous guess, since Phoenix Girl and Cyclops are still alive at this time, it proves that this is the world that reverses the future after World War I. In this timeline, Professor Charles reads Wolverine's memories from the future and is supposed to have a good understanding of what happened after that. That's why he was able to change the fate of Phoenix Girl and Cyclops and save them from a tragic death. In that case, he should also know about this mutant's inhibition of genetic medicine. But he knows everything, and he asked Cyclops and Storm Girl to investigate the yarn. As for Wolverine, who should also know everything, it was because he was brainwashed again, so he lost his previous memories. So he doesn't know anything, which is quite normal. Could it be Professor Charles has been acting? Or maybe he's afraid that he'll change too much about the future and get out of control. So, I don't want to change what was supposed to happen. This is really possible, after all, Qin Haisheng discovered. There are a lot of things happening in this world that he has never heard of. If Charles relied on his knowledge of the future and interfered at will, it's hard to say what the world will look like then. But no matter what, the Battle of Alcatraz Island that is about to take place, Qin Haisheng has to intervene. He has to go through the war to make his strength improve quickly. Just by picking up attributes in the Mutant Academy, when will he have to pick them up? So Qin Haisheng immediately said, "No more investigating, I know what's going on. There is a mutant named Jimmy, and his ability is that within 3 meters of him, he can suppress the ability of all mutants. And the Worthington Laboratory used his serum to develop this mutant gene suppression agent. Now the demonic girl has rescued Magneto, and Magneto took it very seriously after learning about this, and should be preparing to lead the people of their mutant brotherhood to attack Alcatraz Island, where the Worthington Laboratory is located. In the past 2 days, prepare to kill the mutant named Jimmy and destroy all the mutant-based suppression potions. And the Federation will never allow this to happen, and I'm afraid there will be a large-scale war between mutants and Federation officials. Professor Charles, I don't think we should do something about it in this situation." Hearing Qin Haisheng's words, Professor Charles and Rogan looked at each other for a moment, and then Professor Charles had no choice but to nod and say, "Indeed. We can't let Eric mess around like this. That will only push mutants into the opposite side of normal humanity. I'll get Scott and then back now and then Logan. You take a few more people and rush to Alcatraz Island at once and try to stop Eric as much as possible." At this point, the professor sighed lightly and continued, "If you really can't stop it, then save as many ordinary people as possible and don't let Eric cause too many killings." Boom dash. The X-Men's exclusive fighter, the Blackbird, slowly landed in the small square in front of the Mutant Academy building. Scott, who wore red quartz glasses, Oro the Storm Girl, and a blue-skinned man with a tail got off the plane and headed straight for the dean's office in the building. At this time, Uncle Wolf had already selected several Mutant Academy students to wait here. Among these people, in addition to Qin Haisheng, there are also Iceman Bobby, Burning Man John, and Phantom Cat Katie. As for Wanda and Quicksilver, they did not participate in this operation. After all, this time they are likely to go to war with Magneto, and the twins still think that they are Magneto's children. Even if they are brainwashed by Qin Haisheng, they don't agree with Magneto's concept, but they don't want to be enemies of Magneto. Both Qin Haisheng and Professor Charles can understand this. As long as the twins don't join Magneto's side to deal with them, it will save them a lot less trouble. If they are allowed to participate in this operation, in case they are repeatedly rebelled by Magneto's unscrupulous guys, it will be a real loss. In the original plot, Burning Man John took refuge in Magneto and became the new favorite of Magneto after the saber-toothed tiger. In the Battle of Alcatraz Island, he had an ice and fire duel with the Iceman, but was beaten by the Iceman without temper. But now is the world after reversing the future, and it is possible that the original Lake Alkali incident did not happen, so... Burning Man also didn't defect out of the Mutant Academy, and now he is a member of the rebellion against Magneto. Last time, John was unexpectedly smashed into the artificial lake of the Academy by Qin Haisheng because he couldn't swim and was afraid of water. Almost didn't drown. After being rescued, he was punished for violating the rules of the Academy and was punished for copying the rules of the Academy 1,000 times. As a result, when he finished his punishment and saw the light of day again, Qin Haisheng left the Mutant Academy, which made him quite unhappy, and he always wanted to find a chance to get rid of his shame. At this time, seeing that Qin Haisheng was not only selected by Uncle Wolf to participate in this mission, but also saw Qin Haisheng and Uncle Wolf standing together, talking and laughing with Professor Charles, as if the other party was the leader of the younger generation of the Mutant Academy, which made him even more annoyed. Bobby, who was standing beside him, noticed John's resentful gaze, couldn't help frowning slightly, and whispered, "If I were you, I'd forget all about the past. That Huaxia kid seems to be very powerful now, so it's better to mess with him less." John pursed his lips, revealing an unruly look, and said, "He's only been able to awaken his ability for a few days. No matter how powerful he is, how powerful can he be? Bobby, I heard that when Naughty left the Academy, he only left a note for this kid. Also, Katie's look at that kid isn't quite right. Didn't you tell me last time? Do you feel like the person you like more is Katie? You're willing to be this shrunken turtle. You." Bobby was just kind enough to persuade John, but he didn't expect this guy to provoke himself instead. However, even if he knew that John was using the agitation method on him, the point was, this kind of thing is something that a man can't bear. Especially the new Wanda, who is too beautiful to talk about, even made eye contact with that Huaxia kid, which made the fire in his heart, and even his freezing ability was about to be unsealed. It's just that Poppy is not as reckless as John. No matter how angry he is in his heart, he will not show it in front of Professor Charles. He just snorted coldly and then hung his head. There was a sound of messy footsteps, and Scott and the other three walked in. As soon as Qin Haisheng turned around, when he saw the blue-skinned man with a long tail, his eyes couldn't help but light up. "Wow! Isn't this the Blue Devil? The devout cultist who can teleport?" Qin Haisheng has been coveting this ability for a long time, okay? This ability seems to be a little weaker than Quicksilver, but it is also very useful. Especially if you can teleport with you. It's so convenient. Quicksilver didn't dare to take others to speed up with him. Otherwise, if he took a person to go around the Earth at the speed of light, it is estimated that the person who turned around would not even be able to find a molecule. The load on the body at high speeds is quite terrifying, so it can be seen that Quicksilver definitely has a hanging, otherwise how could he withstand the destruction of the speed of light with only his flesh and blood? Seeing that everyone had arrived, Professor Charles gave a general account of the mission and he gave the command of the operation to Scott. Uncle Wolf's prestige is very high in the Mutant Academy, but after all, it is later, and it is not considered a descendant. Or maybe it's because Uncle Wolf often has amnesia and doesn't feel very reliable. So Professor Charles, he still trusts Scott and Stormgirl more. Scott lifted his glasses, and his eyes swept over the red quartz lenses on everyone, and finally landed on Qin Haisheng's body, and then frowned. Because he found out. The thing was sneaking up behind the Blue Devil, and then reached out and grabbed the Blue Devil's tail. Scott saw that Qin Haisheng was still playing pranks on such an occasion, and he really hated iron but not steel. Just when he wanted to shout and reprimand, he saw the Blue Devil in front of Qin Haisheng turned into a cloud of blue mist and disappeared. Qin Haisheng's hand directly grabbed the air. But Qin Haisheng's eyes flashed with an inexplicable surprise. Pick up +7 to the Spatial Elemental Core. From the Blue Devil, accumulate 300 Spatial Elemental Cores to activate the first spatial ability. Then Qin Haisheng discovered. The number of his spatial elemental cores has increased by another 7 points, reaching 125 points. And the previous 118 points, but Qin Haisheng spent several days and worked hard to get it from the flickering girl. I didn't expect it. The elemental core obtained from the blue demon is indeed the same. Originally, because of the flickering and leaving with the saber-toothed tiger, Qin Haisheng thought that he would not be able to brush out this spatial ability for a while. But I didn't think about it. The blue devil immediately picked up the flashing class. Professor Charles naturally saw the scene, but he did not reprimand Qin Haisheng harshly, but just said with some tears and laughter, "Qin, don't mess around." Qin Haisheng stuck out his tongue and didn't say anything. At this moment, the blue devil cowered and stuck a head through the doorway, like a bag of anger. Scott beckoned to the blue devil and said, "Kurt, come here. It's okay, that kid is just a little naughty, and he shouldn't have any ill will towards you." As he spoke, he also turned his head to look at Qin Haisheng. Although he couldn't see Scott's eyes clearly through his glasses, Qin Haisheng still felt. This guy must be glaring at himself. The blue devil shrunk his neck, and then he let out a poof. The whole child disappeared from the spot again, and then appeared next to Scott. Qin Haisheng craned his neck and looked at the location where the blue demon man was just now and couldn't help but be a little disappointed when he didn't see any new attribute bubbles. At this moment, I only heard Scott say, "Qin, this time your mission is different from others." "What do you mean?" Qin Haisheng's eyes widened suddenly. "What does this guy want to do?" "Don't want to take me to play anymore," Scott said with a solemn face. "In the past 2 days, Jean seems to be in some trouble. But she was adamant that she wouldn't let me be involved in her affairs and wouldn't tell me what was going on. I'm worried about what danger she'll be in. So, I hope you can go and help me get her back." And, as he spoke, he glanced at Professor Charles again before he continued. "And the professor also hopes that Jean can go to Alcatraz Island this time, but the professor has contacted Jean several times, and she has refused to communicate with the professor. It seems that the matter should be more serious." Qin Haisheng was already a little stunned when he heard this. "What's the situation? In this battle of Alcatraz, will the Phoenix girl also participate? Isn't she not blackened? How? What's going on now?" He was puzzled, so he cast an inquiring glance at Professor Charles. Professor Charles sighed lightly and said, "Qin, you can go. The situation of Jean is complicated, so I won't explain it to you in detail here. The only thing you need to do now is to find Jean and take her safely to Alcatraz." Listening to Professor Charles's words, Qin Haisheng became more and more puzzled in his heart. Why did Charles have to let Phoenix Girl go to Alcatraz? Isn't it because he wants to correct the deviation of history and finally wants the Phoenix to die on Alcatraz Island? But when you think about it, you think it's unlikely. If Professor Charles was really afraid of historical deviations, then he would not have changed history and allowed Phoenix Girl and Cyclops to survive. But now Qin Haisheng only wants to go to Alcatraz Island. In case he misses the Alcatraz battle because he went to find the Phoenix Girl, then his loss will be great. So, he said with some unconvincing, "But why did you have to let me go?" I don't know her very well, and even if I can find her, she won't listen to me. Or, let's let Scott or Mr. Logan go. Mr. Jean should be closer to the two of them, or be able to listen to their advice." Scott's and Uncle Wolf's faces suddenly darkened. The triangular relationship between them and Jean Grey, don't talk about it in front of so many people. "All right?" "No." Professor Charles immediately denied it, saying it was useless for them to go. "Or only you can trigger the future variables. Although I don't know, this variable is a good thing or a bad thing. But there are changes and, after all, they are good." Qin Haisheng couldn't help but be stunned. At this moment, he suddenly felt, in the professor's wise eyes, there is no secret at all. Am I the only one who can trigger the future variables? Isn't that saying? The very existence of me as a person is a variable. So, Professor, he probably didn't know that I was from another world at all. stretching over the endless Mojave Desert. The Blackbird fighter flew through the air at a distance of 5,000 meters and disappeared in an instant. But after the Blackbird fighter disappeared, there were two black dots in the sky that flashed and flickered, constantly falling in the direction of the ground. Qin Haisheng was grabbed by the arm of the Blue Devil Kurt and felt the space around him constantly change. Neither of them carried a parachute and just jumped straight out of the plane. None of them have the ability to fly, but if Qin Haisheng is willing to burst his clothes again, then he only needs to turn his whole body into flames, and he will definitely be able to land safely. However, the Blue Devil can use the unstoppable teleportation to offset the acceleration of the free fall. As long as his original speed is not too fast, then after a teleportation, the original speed will disappear, and his body will temporarily become stationary. In this way, as long as he can teleport nonstop, although the distance he can teleport is very limited, he can also teleport from outer space all the way to the ground without taking any damage. Qin Haisheng naturally didn't want to run anymore. What's more, it's still in front of a man. So he had to trouble the Blue Devil to land with him. Originally, Scott just wanted Qin Haisheng to find the Phoenix Girl by himself, but Qin Haisheng said that he had to bring the Blue Demon with him. The reason is that Qin Haisheng said that he didn't know the road. And Professor Charles only said the approximate location of the Phoenix Girl at the moment. Qin Hai was afraid that he would get lost directly when he arrived in this desert that looked the same in all directions. In addition, the Blue Devil's teleportation is just right for running, and having him by his side will make Qin Haisheng feel more at ease. Of course, there is one more thing that Qin Haisheng didn't say. That is, he can also take the opportunity to pick up some more space element core bubbles on the road. Originally, Qin Haisheng thought that this was a height of 5,000 meters, and the Blue Demon Man couldn't tell how many times he had to teleport to reach the ground. But as a result, the Blue Devil's teleportation ability is beyond his imagination. At a total altitude of 5,000 meters, the Blue Demon Man and Qin Haisheng only teleported 6 times in total before successfully landing on the soft sand. And in this process, Qin Haisheng had only just picked up a bubble in the core of the space element. The moment the two of them landed on the sand, they didn't even stir up any dust. As soon as he landed, the Blue Demon Man immediately let go of Qin Haisheng's arm, as if he was worried that Qin Haisheng's body would stain his hands. The Durrani Canyon is in this direction, and it should be about 35 to 40 kilometers away. The Blue Demon Man looked at Qin Haisheng as he spoke, and said, "This distance is too far, I can't teleport over with you so. You'll be on your own, and I'll be here to pick you up." Qin Haisheng said a little speechlessly, "Since it's still so far away, why doesn't Scott let us jump off later?" The Blue Devil shook his head and said, "Maybe I'm afraid that if we land too close to the canyon, someone will find out in advance." Qin Haisheng still didn't give up and said, "Gotta. So you're going to let me go through like this? What if I get lost halfway through?" The Blue Devil is speechless. How can you still get lost when you are such a big person? However, seeing Qin Haisheng entangled, he could only say helplessly, "Then I'll send you again. When I can see the canyon, I really don't care." Qin Haisheng grinned. The goal was achieved. If you let the Blue Devil send another 20 or 30 kilometers, then you should be able to pick up a few attribute bubbles, right? If you finally catch a sheep, you have to die. It's just that what Qin Haisheng didn't expect was that this guy actually said that he wouldn't teleport with Qin Haisheng anymore. He said that he was willing to send Qin Haisheng for another distance, that is, to accompany Qin Haisheng and help Qin Haisheng show the way. And if he just walks, the Blue Devil will naturally not use the skill of teleportation, which makes Qin Haisheng pick up bubbles. However, Qin Haisheng would definitely not give up like this. He was ruthless at the moment, directly exerted force under his feet, and used all his strength to expand his speed, raising the yellow sand under his feet. And his figure ran forward like flying. From a distance, it looked as if a sinuous dragon had appeared on the golden desert clinging to the ground. The Blue Devil was in a daze. "Didn't you let me stay with you? Why did you run on your own? And why is this guy running so fast? If you don't use teleportation, you won't be able to catch up at all." After Qin Haisheng picked up a large number of speed attribute bubbles from Quicksilver, His current speed could already reach the state of sound, and now that he was seriously soaring at speed. If the blue demon didn't have the ability to teleport across kilometers in one step, then he would really be beyond Qin Haisheng's reach. In desperation, the blue devil had no choice but to activate the ability again, and with a pung, the blue figure disappeared in place, and at the same time appeared from 1,000 meters away. After only 3 times, he had already caught up with Qin Haisheng, who was running wildly. Qin Haisheng saw the blue demon man catching up. A bright smile appeared on his face, and then he suddenly turned around and ran back in the direction he came from. The figure of the blue devil was stunned, and he looked at Qin Haisheng, who was running farther and farther away with a confused expression, and couldn't help but shout after a while, "Hey, you're going in the wrong direction." Of course, Qin Haisheng didn't go in the wrong direction. The reason why he ran back was because he saw the attribute bubbles dropped by the blue demon man in the distance. Of course, he wouldn't miss this. Pick up the Spatial Elemental Core +8. From the Blue Devil, accumulate 300 Spatial Elemental Cores to activate the first spatial ability. The Space Elemental Core has reached a total of 132 points. But there is still more than half of it. How can I make this little blue man teleport a few more times and drop some more attribute bubbles? Qin Haisheng tilted his head and thought about it, and then quickly rushed back to the blue demon man's side. The blue devil looked at him with a confused expression and said, "What did you do just now?" Qin Hai said physiologically, "I'm looking at the terrain." The blue devil turned his head to look at the flat desert environment around him and was a little speechless. "It's all the same all around. You observe a ghost." Qin Haisheng didn't mean to explain it all and turned around. He began to run in another direction. The blue devil was stunned for a moment and hurriedly shouted, "Hey, you're running in the wrong direction again. The Durerni Gorge is on your right." Qin Haisheng responded from afar, "Did you go in the wrong direction? It's okay, I'll take a look at the terrain over here first." Next, Qin Haisheng was like a happy husky and began to jump around the desert from east to west and west. The normal running speed of the blue demon couldn't catch up with Qin Haisheng at all, so he could only keep teleporting for short distances. Half an hour later, the blue devil was like a dead dog, lying on his back on the sand, saying that he would not accompany Qin Haisheng anymore. Qin Haisheng had already run out for a long distance, and seeing that the blue demon man had not followed him, he had to turn around and run back. When he ran to the blue devil, he braked sharply under his feet and suddenly splashed the sky full of dust, almost burying the blue devil on the spot. Poof dash. The blue demon man came out from under the floating sand, half sitting, spit out the sand in his mouth, and then glared at Qin Haisheng viciously, and fell on his back in the sand pit again. Can make a pious cultist with a mellow and kind heart can't help but be angry. Qin Haisheng can also be regarded as very remarkable. In terms of not doing personnel, it is estimated that there are few people in the Mutant Academy who can be stronger than him. Let's go. Brother Cotter, why don't you keep up? I almost got lost, you know. The blue devil waved his hand weakly and said, "If you want to get lost, get lost. I am tired. Let's destroy together." "No. How can you, a devout believer, lie down so confidently?" So Qin Haisheng hurriedly and shamelessly taught him a lesson. "No. Didn't your Lord teach you to be good? I am now a lost lamb. How can you leave me alone? Hurry up, I really can't find where the Durerni Canyon is right now. Help me." "I promise." As long as you find the right direction for me, teleport me a few more times, and then I won't have to trouble you anymore. Qin Haisheng's mood at the moment was both excited and anxious. He didn't toss in vain for more than half an hour, during which he guided the blue demon to teleport hundreds of times, and naturally picked up a lot of attribute bubbles. I have to say, when it comes to combat effectiveness, this blue devil is actually a weak chicken, and he is not necessarily stronger than a physical person. Because of this, the probability of him dropping the ability core is relatively large. Qin Haisheng tossed the blue demon for so long, and only saw him drop 2 speed attribute bubbles and 1 recovery attribute bubble. The rest is all about the spatial element core. This made the spatial element core obtained by Qin Haisheng quickly approach the 300-point mark. Just now, after obtaining another bubble, Qin Haisheng's space element core had already accumulated 395 points. Just one more time. He can definitely activate the superpower of the spatial attribute. As for whether the portal or teleportation skills will be activated at that time, this can only be left to fate. Either way, the superpowers of the space department are better at saving their lives. As long as they don't die, it will be difficult for others to kill you. But now it's just the last time, and the blue devil guy is actually holding up. How can he be willing? It's a pity that the blue devil at this time seems to have been really tossed by him and collapsed, and he didn't mean to get up and run with him again, just pointed to the cloudy sky, and then said weakly, "You can't find the location of the canyon, and I can't help it. Because I'm lost with you too. It's cloudy again, I can't even tell the difference between southeast and west, and I also don't know where the Darini Canyon is. Let me rest for a while. Wait. I'll teleport to the sky to take a breath and take a look or find the location of the canyon. Of course, the premise is that you didn't lead us too far away from the canyon just now, otherwise I might not be able to see it if I teleported to a high altitude." Qin Haisheng couldn't help but scratch his head a little embarrassed, and said in his heart, "Did I get rid of it? After such a long delay, the Phoenix girl will be fine." Seeing the firelight in the distance, Qin Haisheng and the blue demon man glanced at each other, and their expressions became serious. In this desolate desert, there is suddenly such a dazzling fire rising, which is definitely related to superpowers. So, that's probably where they're going to be on the Dalani Gorge. According to Charles's investigation, the Phoenix girl should be in this canyon, and she has a vague foreknowledge that she may encounter mortal danger. However, Professor Charles is only a psychic mutant, not a legendary prophet. Even if he had some memories of the future from Wolverine, the problem was, Jean Grey's fate had already been changed by him once. Therefore, any future related to Jean Grey has changed, and the part of Wolverine's memories that comes from Wolverine no longer has any reference value. Therefore, even Professor Charles can only have a premonition that something dangerous will happen to Jean Grey, and the specific details are unknown. At this time, there is a sudden fire in the distance, so it is very likely the danger that Professor Charles foresaw may have already begun. Qin Haisheng's heart tightened, and he couldn't help but feel a little guilty. If he hadn't been obsessed with trying to brush out the spatial ability on the Blue Devil and hadn't wasted more than half an hour then. By this time, you should have already arrived at the Darini Gorge. Therefore, if Jean Grey really had an accident, wouldn't it be equivalent to being killed indirectly by him? However, soon Qin Haisheng felt wrong again. In the world after reversing the future, Jean Grey is definitely not dead, and she is not blackened. In the future, when Uncle Wolf regained his memory, he also saw Jean Grey. That means that even if Qin Haisheng crossed over to this world without him, Qin Galei would definitely be fine. Thinking of this, Qin Haisheng immediately felt a lot more relieved. But this doesn't mean that Qin Haisheng plans to ignore Qin Galei. After all, if there is a big battle involving a level 5 mutant, it will also be a good time for him to pick up attributes. How can you miss this kind of good thing? So, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but pick up the Blue Devil from the sandpit, and then slapped the other party's waist hard, saying, "Little Blue, quick, take me to teleport in that direction. Teacher Qin can't be fine, we have to go over and save her. I'm just a leader. The professor didn't tell me to save people." The Blue Devil looked aggrieved and shrunk his neck, feeling a fear that his life was in danger. Jean Grey is a 5th-level mutant. If even such a terrifying existence is in danger of his life, then his little Karami rushes up at this time. Isn't it just an experience pack for the enemy? Qin Haisheng glared and said, "Don't talk nonsense. I didn't say that you should save people. But you've got to at least send me there, right? Otherwise, these 20 or 30 miles of road, waiting for me to walk over. Are you waiting to collect the body for Teacher Qin?" All right. The Blue Demon Man had no choice but to grab Qin Haisheng's arm and at the same time muster up his remaining strength, brushed, and began to teleport in the direction of the firelight with Qin Haisheng again and again. When the Blue Devil teleported 7 times in a row, he finally dropped an attribute bubble. Qin Haisheng, who had been prepared for a long time, quickly fished out the Blue Demon in his hand before he teleported again. It's just a pity. This is a normal bubble with stamina attributes. And after dropping this bubble, the Blue Devil's feet were weak, and he almost didn't kneel on the ground, obviously looking physically exhausted. Qin Haisheng couldn't help but ponder. After dropping the physical strength attribute, Xiao Lanlin's physical strength is significantly worse. Is it because of his physical exertion that he caused the physical strength attribute bubbles to be dropped? Or is it because of the drop of the stamina attribute bubble, so the stamina will become weaker? Qin Haisheng was a little confused about the causal relationship. However, he clearly felt that his physical strength had recovered a little after picking up this attribute bubble. But at this time, he didn't have time to think about such a profound question. Because after another few teleportations, the Blue Devil finally dropped a silver bubble again. It's just that this time the bubble fell on the other side of the Blue Demon Man's body, and Qin Haisheng couldn't reach it at all. Seeing that the Blue Demon was gasping for breath and was about to teleport again, Qin Haisheng hurriedly shouted, "Wait a minute." The Blue Devil was stunned for a moment and asked, "What's wrong?" Qin Haisheng turned to the other side of the Blue Demon with a serious expression and explained at the same time, "I feel like I'm going to awaken my superpowers." What? The Blue Devil is a little puzzled. Didn't this guy awaken his superpowers a long time ago? Why do you want to do it again? But then he remembered that he heard that this Huasha kid had awakened 3 superpowers alone. Then he's not kidding. But that's scary, isn't it? If you say awaken, you will awaken. Does your family own a superpower self-selection store? Pick up the Spatial Elemental Core +9. Accumulate 300 Spatial Elemental Cores to activate the first spatial ability. Spatial Attribute Superpower Activation. Activation successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Spatial Attribute Superpower, Messen Space. With this ability, you can carve out a 5 cubic meter of Messen space in your own body. This space can be used to collect and store items that are smaller than the space. The Messen space does not belong to this universe. There is no air, no weight, and no living organisms. After that, for every 100 space capability cores invested, 1 cubic meter of space can be opened up in the Messen space. What's that? It's not the teleportation or portal spatial ability that is activated. But this Messen space seems to be good. I don't seem to have heard of any mutants possessing this ability. Isn't this the function of the storage magic weapon in Eastern mythology? So, it's not going to be another jump, is it? Qin Haisheng didn't care about it so much. He pondered it slightly in his heart and chose the location of this Messen space on his forehead. He will definitely brush up on his super regenerative abilities in the future. Then, under normal circumstances, in the face of a fierce battle, even if his arms and legs are cut off, or even his entire body is cut off, he has a chance to survive. But if he pins the Messen space on the palm of his hand, his arm, or his chest, he may lose it. Only the head, no matter at all times, must be closely protected. If one day, he really can't even save his head, then most of his life will be gone, in this case. And what is the use of this Messen space? After selecting the location of the sustenance, Qin Haisheng immediately activated the ability of the Messen space. Then I felt as if there was an extra length, width, and height in my mind, all of which were about 1.5 meters in a cube space. The space was empty. There was nothing. However, he only had a slight thought, and all the bits and pieces such as wallets and mobile phones that he had brought with him were immediately transferred to this space, and then floated there. Tut. You don't have to touch your hands to put things in, so it's so convenient. With this mess in space, Qin Haisheng no longer has to worry about having no clothes to cover his shame after turning into a flame in the future. Well, when I have time to turn around, I will buy a dozen sets of clothes and throw them into the mess in space to store. Of course, if it was possible, Qin Haisheng would definitely still want a set of clothes that could not be afraid of high-temperature burning. After all, even if he has clothes to change, he can't change them in front of others. It's just that. After he transformed, the flame temperature could reach up to 3,600 degrees in the state of full burst. In such high temperatures, even gold melts, and it is not easy to find a garment that can withstand such heat. I guess there are really such clothes, they can all be compared to artifacts. Alright, let's go. Qin Haisheng didn't forget that Qin Galei might be in danger, and the awakening of her superpower was only delayed for a few seconds. He didn't have time to study this new ability in detail, so he hurriedly got up, grabbed the Blue Devil's arm, and urged him to hurry up. The Blue Demon Man blinked, and while teleporting Qin Haisheng to a kilometer away, he asked, "Have you awakened your superpowers?" "No." Qin Haisheng opened his eyes and said, "Nonsense. Awakening failed." The Blue Devil pursed his lips and said, "No, I can sense something changing in your body. And there seems to be a great power of space in this change. So, you've awakened your spatial powers, right?" Qin Haisheng glanced at the Blue Demon Man with some surprise. There's something about this little blue. He remembers. In addition to the ability to teleport, the Blue Devil also has the perception of a beast. Unexpectedly, this kind of perception is quite strong, and he can actually tell what kind of ability he has awakened. Or, this also has something to do with the fact that he himself has the superpower of the space system. Originally, Qin Haisheng habitually left a whole card for himself, trying not to let people know his true strength. However, since it has been discovered by the Blue Devil, there is no need to hide. And Xiaolanlan is kind by nature, so she shouldn't sell herself to others. So he beckoned, and suddenly there was an extra mobile phone in his hand. Then, with his palm stretched out flat and still, the phone disappeared abruptly. The Blue Devil's eyes widened in astonishment and said, "You've put your phone in a strange space. What is this ability? How I haven't heard of it?" Qin Haisheng grinned and said, "You haven't heard much. Every newly awakened mutant may appear with a new superpower, right?" The Blue Devil nodded silently and didn't say anything more. Then, after several teleportations, the two finally saw two not very tall peaks in the distance, and a long canyon between the peaks. The sky-high flame had long since disappeared. At this moment, the canyon in front of him stood there quietly, like a monster that wanted to choose people to devour. The golden sand covered most of the canyon along the canyon, and the surface of the sand was so smooth that not even a single footprint could be seen, and it didn't look like it was infested at all. When he came here, the Blue Devil's expression immediately became nervous, and his head shrank so much that he was about to burrow into his stomach. Seeing his cowardice, Qin Haisheng smiled, hee and said, "All right, you can wait for me around here. I'll go in and see if Teacher Jean is there." With that, Qin Haisheng immediately spread his legs, like a bolt of lightning, and rushed towards the canyon. After entering the canyon, Qin Haisheng slowed down and ran along the open space in the middle of the canyon while searching around. In less than 2 minutes, Qin Haisheng had already crossed the entire canyon, but still did not find any clues. He could only turn around and return to the center of the canyon, and after looking around, he suddenly raised his hand and shot a pillar of fire as thick as a bucket and struck at the steep peak on the right. Boom dash. A long pillar of fire slammed into the mountain, and the ground seemed to shake a few times with the sound of a violent explosion. Immediately afterwards, a large crater with a diameter of nearly 10 meters was blasted out of the cliff, and countless rubbles burst out one after another, falling from the sky like meteorites and smashing on the ground, splashing the yellow sand all over the sky. It's not that Qin Haisheng found out that there was anything wrong with that cliff, but he just felt that since he couldn't find Qin Galei, it was better to make some noise and let Jean go. Or maybe Jean Grey's enemies are coming for her. Sure enough, after he made such a big noise, less than a minute later, he heard a rustling sound not far away. Qin Haisheng hurriedly followed the sound and looked, and suddenly saw. At some point, dozens of palm-sized mechanical spiders with red eyes and bodies and limbs made entirely of metal parts appeared in the sand. Seeing the scene, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but be stunned. What's the situation? In this big desert where birds don't, how can there be so many? It's a high-tech thing at first glance. So, isn't this a hidden Federation lab or a secret base? Qin Haisheng knew that he had really lured out Jean Grey's enemies. Only, where did these mechanical spiders come from? Qin Haisheng did not act rashly, but while being on guard, he judged from where these mechanical spiders appeared through the movement trajectory of them. He estimated that these mechanical spiders may be carrying thermal weapons on their bodies. But he wasn't worried about anything. He had probably tested it before, and his speed could barely reach twice the speed of sound. And the average bullet flies at less than 3 times the speed of sound. His speed is not as fast as the initial velocity of a bullet, but as long as he kept a certain distance, it was easy for him to dodge the bullets. What's more, he can also turn into flames, which is immune to most physical attacks. Therefore, although these mechanical spiders look weird, he is not worried that he will be killed by some small spiders. Soon, Qin Haisheng discovered that not all of these mechanical spiders were swarming towards him. Instead, it is dispersing in all directions. Didn't these mechanical spiders come at me? Or, are they trying to surround me? Qin Haisheng felt that he should be more cautious, so he raised his hand. A fireball the size of an apple flew straight towards the nearest mechanical spider. Phew dash. The mechanical spider clearly had a move to dodge, but it couldn't dodge. The fireball landed on the back of the mechanical spider and began to burn wildly. Qin Haisheng's fireball had 2 attack patterns. The first is to produce an explosion after hitting the target, directly releasing all the energy contained in the fireball in an instant. This will naturally cause more damage to the target. The second mode just keeps the target burning after it lands on the target. At this moment, Qin Haisheng is using the second model. And the temperature of the flame was also deliberately lowered to keep it at about 1,000 degrees. Just to see how the mechanical spider reacts. Outcome. Qin Haisheng saw that this thing was struggling and rolling like a creature on the verge of death in the flames. It wasn't until all 8 mechanical limbs were burned off that they could only lie quietly in the flames, slowly melting into a puddle of metallic liquid. Shhhh. Qin Haisheng couldn't help but gasp. How did he feel about the mechanical spider's reaction, some of which didn't look like cold mechanical equipment, but what about living beings? And until the mechanical spider was burned into a liquid metal, there was no explosion. This means the interior of the mechanical spider should not be loaded with thermal weapons. So, what the hell is this? These mechanical spiders can't really be alive. At this moment, Qin Haisheng's mind couldn't help but think of the cube and the transformers. I wiped it. It looks like I'm about to jump on the stage again. It can't really be, right? And just when Qin Haisheng was stunned, a feeling of extreme danger suddenly arose from the bottom of his heart. Qin Haisheng's face changed, and just when he wanted to make a move, he saw the bodies of the dozens of mechanical spiders in front of them suddenly shot out a green light at the same time. Dozens of green rays of light seemed to be woven into a large net, covering a range of more than 10 meters around Qin Haisheng in an instant. Under the crisscrossing, there are few gaps. The speed of that light was extremely fast, and when Qin Haisheng found out, these green lights had already hit him. Even if Qin Haisheng has a speed twice the speed of sound, it is still not worth mentioning at the real speed of light. When he noticed that something was wrong, he only shook his body slightly, and he didn't even have time to turn his body into flames. It has already been pierced by at least a dozen green lights. 2 of them pierced his head, and 1 of them pierced his heart at the speed of light. In addition, 5 speeds of light pierced through different parts of his torso. Moreover, after these beams pierced through Qin Haisheng's body, they actually shot out a distance of hundreds of meters and then gradually dissipated. Qin Haisheng's expression maintained a shocked expression, and it solidified. But the next second later, there was still a puff on his body, and a raging flame came out. It's just that his body doesn't completely maintain the form of a flame. With another wave of dozens of green rays hitting his body soon, I heard a boom, and the flame body seemed to be a powder keg that had been lit, and it exploded directly, turning into sparks in the sky and drifting away in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. It's really a corpse with no bones left. The mechanical spiders paused in place for a few seconds, waiting for the flames in the air to disappear before they quickly crawled forward. After turning around a few times at the place where Qin Haisheng was standing just now, he slowly retreated, lined up in a long line, and climbed under the cliff on the right. On the seemingly intact rock under the cliff wall, a hole about 30 centimeters in length and width suddenly opened. Then the mechanical spiders lined up, crawling towards the hole one by one. Bastard. I still want to run. Let me die. In the quiet canyon, there was a sudden burst of angry curses followed by a fiery dragon suddenly flew from a distance, exactly starting with the last mechanical spider in line. String all the mechanical spiders in a column with sugar gourds. Even the fire dragon drilled directly into the hole under the cliff wall. The small hole was instantly expanded into a large hole with a diameter of more than 1 meter. At the same time, those mechanical spiders that had just climbed into the cave and had not had time to go far were also burned by this terrifying fire dragon and instantly turned into molten iron. It wasn't until the fire dragon gradually dissipated that a figure swept up the yellow sand and rushed from a distance. Looking at the appearance of this person, it is Qin Haisheng, who has obviously been blown into ashes before. It turns out that the one who just came here for a provocative exploration. It's just a clone of Qin Haisheng. He is not stupid, since he knows that even the Phoenix Girl, who is a 5th-level mutant, may encounter danger here. He is a little budding. How dare he be so prodigal without life support? Therefore, after hiding his deity in a hidden place outside the canyon, he released another doppelganger, swaggered back to the center of the canyon, and then attacked the mountain peak so that the hidden enemy would emerge on his own initiative. Even though his doppelganger only has 70% of the strength of the deity, and you can only have one of the superpowers of the deity. However, at least it is enough for pathfinding. Unexpectedly, before this clone could see Jean Grey or the shadow of the enemy, he was blown up by a volley of mechanical spiders. Fortunately, Qin Haisheng created a clone, and the life energy and spiritual power consumed could be fully recovered in only 10 minutes at most, so it's not very distressing to die a clone. However, being folded in the hands of a group of mechanical spiders still made him a little annoyed and angry. Thereupon, this time, after sending out the second doppelganger, as soon as he appeared, he directly enlarged his move and wiped out all those mechanical spiders. Then Qin Haisheng clone came to the entrance of the cave where the mechanical spider retreated and bent down to take a look inside. It was found that in addition to a large hole that was burned out by the fire dragon before, the diameter of the part inside was less than half a meter. Therefore, this cave should not be for people to walk through, but the entrance of the cave where mechanical spiders enter and exit. Qin Haisheng looked left and right, and he didn't know where the entrance was that allowed people to pass, so he simply gritted his teeth, lay down and climbed in along the entrance of the cave. However, in order to avoid being killed by that terrifying green ray again, Qin Haisheng's mind moved, and this doppelganger had completely turned into a flame state. In this way, the defensive capabilities have improved a lot. I just don't know if I can prevent that kind of green ray attack. Qin Haisheng's body in the flame state was as light as nothing, so even if he was crawling in a cave with a diameter of less than half a meter, the speed was quite amazing. The cave is not straight, and after entering the belly of the mountain for tens of meters, it begins to wind all the way down. When he crawled less than 100 meters away, he heard a slight click in front of him. Qin Haisheng's heart moved. He didn't think much about it at all, and directly raised his head. A pillar of fire had erupted from his flaming body. With a brush-dash sound, the pillar of fire flew straight forward along the passage. Before a dozen or so of the previous mechanical spiders could launch an attack on Qin Haisheng, they had already been turned into molten iron again. And the cave in front of him was also burned and widened a lot because of the raging of this pillar of fire. Finally, after moving forward more than 200 meters along this narrow cave, the cave in front of me suddenly opened up. However, Qin Haisheng, who stood up, saw a mechanical instrument like a beehive in front of him. In almost every honeycomb there is a mechanical spider lying on its stomach. And the moment Qin Haisheng saw the scene, countless green rays of light pierced through the pitch-black cave and flew straight towards him. Nima. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng only had time to shoot 2 blazing fire dragons casually, and his flame body had already been sieved by at least hundreds of green beams. Then I saw Qin Haisheng's shattered flame body flickering a few times, and then it exploded into countless sparks again. It wasn't until this moment that he was sure. That terrifying green beam turned out to be very lethal to him in the state of flames. Fortunately, his deity didn't rush into here, otherwise this time. I'm afraid it's not completely cool. However, the 2 flames that Qin Haisheng's doppelganger shot out before he died also knocked down a small half of the honeycomb-shaped instrument in front of him. 2 minutes later, another flame clone of Qin Haisheng broke into the cave. And this time, he didn't attack him at all. He directly threw dozens of fireballs in one go, completely blowing up the hive instrument to pieces. It's just that this doppelganger is so crazy about output, but it also causes the energy consumption of this doppelganger to 7788. Qin Haisheng had already discovered that his doppelganger was like a consumable, although the initial attack power could reach 70% of the deity. However, its recovery speed is close to 0, and once the energy carried by the clone is consumed, it will naturally dissipate without the need for others to attack. At this moment, the energy of this clone is about to bottom out. However, in line with the idea of waste utilization, Qin Haisheng still drove this flickering clone into this cave, intending to explore the path again. Outcome. But it was emitted a green light by a mechanical spider that slipped through the web, and after hitting the body, it was completely taken away with a poof. This time, after a full 10 minutes, the 4th Qin Haisheng's clone appeared in the cave. This is because Qin Haisheng discovered he continuously creates clones in a short period of time, which will cause the state of his original figure to decline. If he didn't care about the cost, he would be able to create dozens of clones in one go. However, the consequence of doing so would cause his Buddha figure's 6 basic attributes to decline seriously. And this decline could be permanent. Qin Haisheng was helpless, so he had to wait honestly for 10 minutes, until he returned to his previous state, and then split into a new clone. Now he kind of understands why that guy is so weak. Originally, as long as you were a mutant, it didn't matter what kind of ability you were. As long as you regularly exercise your superpowers, the basic attributes of your body will gradually improve. It must be that brain-dead thing who splits multiple clones and waves everywhere when he has nothing to do, which causes his basic attributes to not rise, and at most he can reach the level of ordinary people. If the doppelganger can strictly follow the frequency of splitting a clone in 10 minutes, maybe the strength of the single body has already improved. But the question is, that guy's ability is passive again, and a slap can automatically split into a clone, so he's also very helpless. After the 4th doppelganger entered the cave, he carefully searched for several mechanical spiders that had slipped through the web and removed them one by one. Finally, after opening a large iron door behind the honeycomb instrument, there was a bright scene of a giant laboratory in front of him. Behind the gate, there are 8 robots made entirely of metal, holding sci-fi laser guns. As soon as Qin Haisheng appeared, the 8 laser guns pointed at Qin Haisheng and shot out white laser rays one after another. In just an instant, Qin Haisheng's flame clone was pierced by 8 lasers. But Qin Haisheng was pleasantly surprised to find, although this laser gun can also cause damage to his flaming body, it is far less powerful than the green rays of the mechanical spider. A few seconds later, 8 more pools of liquid metal appeared on the ground, burning the lab's alloy-paved floor to a pulp. But the laser guns in the hands of those robots were kept by Qin Haisheng. If he had the chance, he would have the deity take the laser guns away. He felt The high-tech content of these laser guns is significantly higher than this world. The Federation Army is considered to be the most advanced in the world, but now they are also using thermal weapons such as gunpowder. As for laser weapons, they have never been applied on a large-scale battlefield, and they are probably in a state of continuous research and development. As for the green ray weapons carried by those mechanical spiders, they are even more terrifying. But the danger of the mechanical spider was too great, and Qin Haisheng didn't dare to leave these calamities for his deity to come into contact with. It doesn't matter if it's high-tech or not. He's not a scientist, so he doesn't care much about these things. Relatively speaking, it's more important to live your own life. Qin Haisheng then continued to explore the huge underground experiment. Walking along the bright corridor, I saw transparent glass walls on both sides, in which various precision instruments were placed. Some of the staff in white coats were busy walking around, and it seemed that the fighting outside was not affected in the slightest. Qin Haisheng was amazed, thinking to himself that these people should all be fanatical science maniacs, right? But when one of the people in the white coat turned around, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but gasp and almost didn't exclaim. It was a Caucasian man who looked like he was thin. If only you were a little thinner. But the man was so thin that his face seemed to be completely devoid of flesh and blood, and he looked like a skeleton covered with human skin. And this man is not only thin on the face, his hands. It was also like a pair of bone claws wrapped in a layer of skin, and Qin Haisheng could even clearly see the shape of each finger bone. Then he realized that it was not just this one person. The staff in the lab coats were almost all carved out of a mold. It's all skinny. This made Qin Haisheng seriously doubt whether these tireless guys who had been busy in the laboratory were human beings. He hesitated slightly, and instead of alarming the strange staff in the lab, he searched all the way. This underground laboratory, hidden in the desert, holds some earth-shattering secrets. But at least for now. His goal is to find Jean Grey and leave the hell with her. If it wasn't necessary, he didn't want to get into trouble. The size of this underground experimental base is so large and intricately arranged that it is like a large labyrinth. Qin Haisheng was searching for a while when he suddenly heard a buzzing sound behind him. When he looked back, he saw something about the size of a tennis ball, with a crystal body, but it was shining with colorful light, and at the same time it had a pair of thin wings flying in the air, slowly approaching him. I'll go. What the hell is this? A crystal ball with wings? What the hell is this place? Why is there so much black technology? Could it be true that some aliens built a base? The skinny skeleton-like guys in the lab aren't all aliens, right? Stop. It's still possible. After all, this world has a multiverse, and Thanos may come to Earth at some point. So, it's not inconceivable that there will be aliens on Earth now. Just when Qin Haisheng was looking at the colorful sphere, he was wondering whether to grasp this thing and study it. But I heard the light in the multicolored sphere flickering and flickering, emitting an electronic synthesis sound similar to a child's voice. Little human brother, are you looking for that sister who has the power of a phoenix? Qin Haisheng blinked, nodded and said, Yes. Who are you? Do you know where she is? The multicolored sphere flew around Qin Haisheng happily and said in a voice, You can call me Elf, I know where that sister is. Do you want me to take you to her? The flames on Qin Haisheng's body jumped, and he temporarily suppressed the idea of wanting to catch this little thing and said, Okay, then take me to her. The elf let out a childlike giggle, and then a pair of thin wings vibrated a few times in a peculiar rhythm, and they saw. A circle of light resembling a gossip pattern suddenly appeared in front of it. Immediately, the aperture gradually expanded, and a different scene appeared in the aperture than this corridor. I'll go. Portal. Hey, that's not right. This portal doesn't seem to be the same as the flickering superpower. It's more like Doctor Strange's magic. So, is this elf from the lineage of the Ancient Mage? Why doesn't it look like it? Ancient One Mage, shouldn't he be researching this kind of black technology? Seeing that the elf had already flown into the portal, Qin Haisheng didn't hesitate and followed him step in. Even if there is really anything wrong with this elf, it doesn't matter. Anyway, what he is here now is just a clone, and if he is killed by a pit for 10 minutes at most, he is a good man. After passing through the portal of that aperture, Qin Haisheng felt as if he had entered an underground tomb. It was pitch black all around, and the air was very humid and cold. However, as soon as Qin Haisheng, a little fireman, entered here, he immediately illuminated the surrounding area of dozens of meters. The cold aura was also dispelled a lot. Then Qin Haisheng saw Qin Galei, not far in front of him, and a Caucasian man wearing a blue-red cloak, with red hair and a ruby on his forehead, was facing each other more than 10 meters apart. The man was tall and handsome, and he looked to be in his 30s at best. But from his eyes, which revealed a hint of evil, he seemed to be able to see a sense of vicissitudes that was difficult to hide. At this moment, between Jean and the man, a terrifying storm was blowing. The storm kept rolling, and everywhere it passed, everything seemed to be turned into the tiniest particles, quickly merging into the storm. The ground here was originally made of metal, but now the metal ground has been blown out of a huge crater by the storm, and even the rocks below have been exposed. Qin Haisheng's eyes couldn't help but widen. Where did this man come out? Can actually compete with the Phoenix Girl. And the current Phoenix Girl also seems to have something not quite right. Isn't she not blackened? There is no blackened Phoenix Girl, it doesn't seem to be so fierce. As far as Qin Haisheng knew, the Phoenix Girl Jean Grey had similar psychic abilities to Professor Charles and could also make objects around her float and manipulate under her telekinesis, and she could create power enchantments. But only when she completely unleashes the power of the ban after blackening can she essentially manipulate the molecular structure of matter and energy, causing it to change its structure. Right now, seeing the black storm rolling between Jean Grey and the man, it was clearly like a force that had been completely disintegrated by a mysterious force. So, Teacher Jean Grey can't be blackened, right? Qin Haisheng was a little confused. So, why did Professor Charles have to let himself come here? Save Jean Grey? Let's not say that Jean Grey doesn't seem to be weaker than that sassy man. Even if Jean Grey loses, does she have the ability to save people from under that guy? It's almost as good as giving away heads. Fortunately, I only sent a clone over. Otherwise, this time it's going to be game over. So, I might just be a mascot, so I'd better eat melons honestly. But at this moment, the man's eyes swept over and let out a cold, strange laugh. Hey, discover another funny little guy. Your genes don't seem to be the same as those of other mutants. Tisk, that's good. Looks like there's new material in my lab. As he spoke, he saw a small part suddenly split out of the black storm that had been tumbling between him and Jean Grey. The black airflow conjured up the appearance of a big hand in the air, and in one fell swoop, it probed a distance of dozens of meters and grabbed it directly towards Qin Haisheng's flame clone. Qin Haisheng couldn't help but be shocked in his heart when he saw this. Genetics experiments. A sassy man with a ruby on his forehead. Qin Haisheng probably guessed it. Isn't this guy the legendary Mr. Evil? The evil scientist who has a long lifespan after being genetically altered by the apocalypse and can use the genes of other mutants to obtain various superpowers. This guy is definitely a supervillain in the Marvel Universe, but he has not appeared in the X-Men series of films. As far as Qin Haisheng knows, this guy has constantly changed his identity and participated in many secret projects in his long life of more than a century, such as Wolverine, Professor Charles, and others were his research objects. This guy also used Jean Grey's genes to create a clone of Jean Grey. In the original plot, after Jean Grey's death, the clone and Cyclops got married and gave birth to a son, the guy who was later codenamed Cable. So, in front of him, is Mr. Evil about to take the genetic sample from Jean Grey? Or still, Jean Grey has been cloned, so that's why she came to settle accounts with this guy. And just as Qin Haisheng was stunned, the big black hand had already firmly grasped his flame clone and lifted it up like a chicken. Even if Qin Haisheng's body erupted with a high temperature of more than 2,000 degrees, he couldn't hurt that big black hand in the slightest. It's just a doppelganger. After the big hand lifted Qin Haisheng, Mr. Disgust couldn't help frowning and said with a look of disgust, "I hate you mutants who can doppelganger the most." No, you don't seem to be a mutant. Well, no matter how much it is. Now I'll give you a chance to tell me where your deity is otherwise. You don't think that as long as you sacrifice this doppelganger, the deity will be fine. Qin Haisheng had never seen Qin Haisheng with his whole body flamed, so she didn't recognize him. At this moment, seeing that Mr. Evil was still able to calmly capture another flame ability in the process of fighting with him, he couldn't help but be shocked and said, "You're actually hiding your strength."